Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, and I mean way back. We're heading to the American West, but we're leaving the John Wayne swagger and the heroic share of fantasies behind. Instead, we're going to explore what life was really like for one of the most mythologized and misunderstood figures of the frontier, the saloon girl. Forget the witty, golden-hearted dancer who always gets the guy in the end. The reality was a lot less glamorous and a lot more, well, let's just say if you were suddenly dropped into this life, you'd be lucky to make it through the first week. It was a world of grit, desperation, and very, very fine print. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always a little magical to think about all of us, scattered across the globe, sharing this quiet moment together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins not in the dusty West, but in the crowded, damp East. Picture yourself there. It's the 1870s, maybe the 1880s. You might be in a soot-stained factory in Boston. Your fingers raw from 12 hours of repetitive work. Or perhaps you're a domestic servant in a wealthy Philadelphia home, invisible and overworked. Your life dictated by the whims of others. Maybe you're an orphan, recently aged out of a system that offered you protection but no future. Whatever your situation, the theme is the same: your world is small, your options are few, and your future feels like a long, grey road leading nowhere special. Then, one day, a little spark of light appears in the gloom. It might be a discarded newspaper, its pages filled with grand stories of booming towns out west. Or maybe it's a letter, passed from a friend of a friend, whispering of a place where a woman can make her own way. The words on the page seem to shimmer with promise. They're looking for entertainers, hurdy-gurdy girls, or concert hall singers. The ads are written with a certain flair, calling for amiable young women of good character to serve as hostesses in newly established, respectable establishments. They promise high wages, room and board, and a life of excitement in a town bursting with opportunity. This is one of those funny little details that gets lost in the big, sweeping narratives of westward expansion. These weren't just simple help-wanted signs. They were carefully crafted pieces of marketing, designed to appeal to your sense of adventure while calming your fears about respectability. The term saloon is often conspicuously absent, replaced by more elegant-sounding names like opera house or variety theater. The promise isn't just a job, it's a reinvention. A chance to be someone new, someone important, in a place where your past doesn't matter. You hold this promise in your hand, and you weigh it against the cold, hard reality of your life. Here, you have certainty, the certainty of poverty, of drudgery, of a life lived on someone else's terms. There, in the West, lies uncertainty, but it's a glittering, hopeful kind of uncertainty, a gamble. You look around at the familiar grey walls of your world and decide to take the bet. You scrape together what little money you have, buy a one-way train ticket, and pack your few belongings into a small, worn-out trunk. Historians still debate this very moment for thousands of women like you. How much of this decision was driven by a genuine thirst for adventure? And how much was simply a flight from unbearable circumstances? It's a classic chicken or egg question of the human spirit. For some, it was undoubtedly a choice made with eyes wide open, a conscious step towards independence. For many others, the word choice feels too generous. When all other doors are closed and locked, is walking through the only one left open truly a free decision? The line between courage and desperation is often so thin it's invisible. The journey itself is a slow, rambling transition from one world to another. The train clatters endlessly, the hard wooden bench doing your back no favors. The lush greens of the east slowly give way to the vast, intimidating browns of the plains. Each stop brings on a new cast of characters, dusty miners with calloused hands, quiet families with hopeful eyes, and slick-looking men with watchful gazes. You keep the newspaper clipping or the letter tucked away safely, pulling it out every now and then to reread the words. They are your shield against the rising tide of anxiety. High wages, respectable work, a new life. It has to be true. It just has to be. Finally, after days that feel like weeks, the train groans to a halt. The conductor calls out the name of your destination, a name that sounded so grand and promising in print, like Silver Creek or Prosperity Gulch. You gather your things, your heart a nervous drum against your ribs, and step off the train. And that's when the first crack in the promise appears. You don't step onto a paved street lined with charming storefronts. You step down into mud. The air, which you imagine would be crisp and clean, is a thick cocktail of dust, no stock, wood smoke, and the distant, sour smell of stale beer. The town is a chaotic jumble of raw lumber buildings, tents, and muddy tracks. The soundtrack isn't a cheerful piano, but a cacophony of hammers, shouting men, and the braying of a tired mule. This is not the picture that was painted for you, and as you stand there, a small figure in a vast, wild landscape, a cold feeling begins to settle in your stomach. You've arrived. The gamble has been made. Now, you have to see what cards you've been dealt. That cold feeling in your stomach is a prelude to the slow, dawning horror of your situation. You clutch the handle of your trunk. The worn leather a flimsy anchor in this chaotic new reality. You ask a passing man, someone whose clothes are slightly less caked in mud than the others, for directions to the Silver Creek Opera House, the grand name from the advertisement. He stops, looks you up and down, and a slow, knowing smile spreads across his face. It's not a kind smile. He simply points a grimy finger towards the largest, loudest, and most ramshackle building at the end of the main thoroughfare. You mean the Gilded Cage, he says, with a little chuckle. That's it, right there. The Gilded Cage. The name hangs in the air, a far more honest descriptor than Opera House. You walk towards it, your boots sinking into the muck with each step. The sounds grow louder and frantic. Slightly out of tune piano, bursts of rough laughter, and the sharp crack of billiard balls. There it is. The entrance. There's no grand marquee, no box office window. There are only the swinging doors. The iconic batwing doors of the West. They're shorter than you imagined, only reaching about waist high, designed to let the sounds and smells of the good times spill out into the street. A constant, tempting invitation. From the outside, they seem almost whimsical. You take a deep breath, a futile attempt to steel your nerves, and push one of them open. It's heavier than it looks. The wood is scarred and stained as you step across the threshold. The doors swing shut behind you with a soft THWU, DTHWUMP, THWUMP, cutting off the bright, dusty daylight. And in that moment, the world changes entirely. Your senses are assaulted. First, the smell. It's a physical presence, a thick, suffocating blanket woven from 100 foul threads stale beer, cheap whiskey, sweat, unwashed bodies, and the acrid sting of cigar smoke that burns the back of your throat. Underneath it all is a damp, earthy smell. You look down and see the source. The floor is covered in a thick layer of sawdust. This is a common historical feature of saloons, but its purpose is far from decorative. It's there to absorb spills, tobacco spit, and anything else that might find its way to the floor. You realize with a shudder that this layer of sawdust is probably days, if not weeks, old as sponge of filth. Then, the noise. It's not a cheerful din. It's a chaotic wall of sound. The piano player, a man in a rumpled suit who doesn't even look up, pounds away at the keys with a mechanical, joyless energy. His music is the frantic heartbeat of the room, but it's constantly fighting against the roar of men's voices, the clatter of poker chips, the sharp clink of glasses, and the low, rumbling threat of an argument brewing in a far corner. There is no peace here. There is no quiet corner. The very air vibrates with a nervous, aggressive energy. Your eyes slowly adjust to the gloom. The air is so thick with smoke it's like looking through a dirty window. You see a long bar of dark, heavily scratched wood running the length of one wall. Behind it, a man with a formidable mustache and a stained apron polishes a glass with a dirty rag, his eyes scanning the room with a practiced, wary vigilance. The patrons are a rough assembly of men miners in canvas trousers, cowboys with spurs that catch the dim light, and a few men in slightly better suits who carry themselves with the dangerous confidence of professional gamblers. They all look the same in one crucial way: they are all looking at you. As your eyes adjust, you realize you're the newest, most interesting thing to happen in this room all day. Their conversations might not have stopped, but their gazes have shifted. It's a heavy, appraising look, the kind a rancher gives a horse he is thinking of buying. In this moment, you cease to be a person with a name and a past. You have become an object of curiosity, a potential product. This is the point where historians often wonder about the internal world of a woman like you. What happens in this exact second do you give in to the immediate, primal urge to turn and flee? To push back through those swinging doors and run until the sounds and smells of this place are a distant memory, or does a different, colder instinct take over, the one that reminds you that you have no money, nowhere to go, and that the man who smirked at you on the street is probably still out there? Scholars debate whether the shock throws women into inaction, or if a grim sense of pragmatism took hold. The knowledge that you've traveled 1,000 miles and burned every bridge behind you can be a powerful paralytic. You might tell yourself this is just the first impression, that it will be better once you meet the proprietor and get settled. You rationalize. You bargain with yourself. You have to. You scan the room for another woman's face, hoping for a sign of reassurance. You see a few. They are clustered around tables with the men, laughing a little too loudly, their smiles painted on like masks. Their dresses, which might have looked fine from a distance, are a bit frayed at the edges, the colors a little faded. Their eyes, when they catch yours for a fleeting second, don't hold welcome. They hold a mixture of pity, resentment, and a deep, profound weariness. They see in you a reflection of their own arrival, a ghost of a hope they once had. You are new competition. Finally, the bartender looks up and catches your eye. He doesn't smile. He doesn't call out a greeting. He simply gives a short, sharp jerk of his head toward a door at the back of the room, next to a rickety-looking staircase. The message is clear: go there. You pull your trunk along, its wheels bumping over the uneven floorboards. Every head turns to watch you pass. The air feels thick, heavy with unspoken questions and assumptions. You reach the back of the room, your hand hesitating for a moment over the doorknob. This is the real point of no return. Pushing through the swinging doors was stepping into the lobby. Opening this door is accepting the job. With one last, shallow breath, you turn the knob and step through, leaving the noise and the smoke of the main room behind you. For now. The door closes behind you, muffling the cacophony of the main room to a dull, rhythmic thumping, like a distant, troubled heart. You find yourself in a small, cramped office, but your attention isn't on the cluttered desk or the stacks of ledgers. It's on the man who was just a moment ago pounding the piano keys. HES followed you off the main floor and is now leaning against the wall, wiping his brow with a handkerchief, the frantic energy draining from him. This is the professor. HES, not a professor. Of course. That's just what everyone calls the saloon piano player. It's a bit of frontier irony, a joke that everyone is in on. In a place defined by its raw, uncultured nature, you give the musician the most academic title you can think of. His real name is probably something like Frank or Charlie, but you'll likely never know it. He exists only as his function. He offers you a tired, non-committal nod. New girl, he says, his voice raspy. The role of the professor is one of those fascinating, niche professions that flourished in the West. He was the saloon's one-man atmosphere generator. His job was to play, and keep playing, sometimes for 10 or 12 hours a day. He had to be versatile, able to switch from a lively ragtime into a mournful ballad at a moment's notice, matching the volatile mood of the room. The music he provided was crucial. It filled the awkward silences, encouraged men to drink faster, and, most importantly, masked the sounds of trouble. A well-timed, loud chord could cover the sound of a cheating accusation at the poker table, or a burst of frantic, upbeat music could distract from a scuffle breaking out by the bar. His piano was the saloon's emotional and auditory camouflage. You look at him now, away from his instrument. He looks older than you first thought. His suit, which looked passably formal from a distance, is shiny with wear at the elbows and cuffs. His fingers, which flew across the keys with such speed, are stained with nicotine. There's a deep-seated exhaustion in his eyes. He is, in many ways, just like you, someone hired to create an illusion of fun and gaiety, a paid participant in the grand performance of the Gilded Cage. This is a good time to mention a strange little tidbit of musical history. Many of these saloon pianos were famously, almost intentionally, out of tune, why the reasons are debated by music historians and cultural anthropologists. Some argue it was simply a matter of practicality. It was nearly impossible to find a qualified piano tuner in a remote mining town, and the constant changes in temperature and humidity wreaked havoc on the instruments. But others propose a more psychological theory, the slightly dissonant, jarring sound of the out-of-tune piano actually contributed to the tense, edgy atmosphere of the saloon. It kept people on edge, subtly encouraging them to drink more to dull their senses. The music was meant to be loud and energetic, not necessarily beautiful. It was functional furniture, like the spitterness and the sawdust. The professor takes a long drag from a cigarette HES just lit. "Boss, I'll be with you in a minute," he mutters, gesturing vaguely towards the desk. Word of advice: don't believe a word he says about putting anything on your tab. Pay cash for a needle and thread if you can. It's cheaper. It's the first genuine, unsolicited piece of kindness you've received since stepping off the train. It's a small thing, but it's a lifeline. It tells you that it's possible to survive here, even if it's just by knowing the rules of a rigged game. You realize the professor occupies a strange, liminal space in the saloon's social structure. HES staff, like the bartender, but he isn't expected to engage with the customers in the same way you will be. HES a fixture, part of the scenery. This position gives him a unique perspective. He sees everything. He sees the hopeful new arrivals and the broken ones who limp away. He knows which gambler is on a winning streak and which one is about to lose everything. He hears the whispered propositions and the drunken confessions. He is the silent, all-seeing chronicler of the room, and his music is the soundtrack to it all. He is a ghost at his own piano. He doesn't say anything more. He just smokes his cigarette, lost in his own thoughts. You stand there in the silence, the muffled piano from your memory now replaced by the real, weary man in front of you. This interaction is a quiet lesson in the social dynamics of your new world. You will learn to read these small cues, to find allies in unlikely places. The professor won't be your friend, not in the traditional sense. He can't afford to be. His loyalty is to his own survival, but, in his own way, he has just drawn you a small, crucial map of one of the dangers that lie ahead. HES warned you about the owner. The muffled thumping from the main room continues, a constant reminder of the world you just left and the one you are about to fully enter. The smell of smoke and stale beer seems to seep in under the door. You're in a strange sort of purgatory, a waiting room between your old life and your new one. The promise of the advertisement feels like a distant, childish dream. The reality is this dusty office, the dull ache in your back from the train journey, and the raspy voice of a tired piano player giving you a cryptic warning. Just as the silence starts to feel heavy, the door you came through opens again. This time, it isn't a customer or a staff member. It's the man with the formidable mustache from behind the bar, the proprietor, the boss. He fills the doorway, his presence immediately shrinking the small room even further. He closes the door firmly behind him, and the dull thumping of the saloon is cut off completely. No, it's just you. Him. And the silent, smoking professor. The boss turns his gaze on you. It's the same appraising look you saw from the patrons, but sharper, more practiced. It's the look of a man who is not buying a horse, but calculating its exact worth, its upkeep, and its breaking point. So he says, his voice a low grumble. You're here the new girl. Let's see what we've got here. He doesn't invite you to sit. The cluttered office has only one chair, and he takes it. Leaning back with a proprietary creak, the professor quietly stubs out his cigarette and, with a final, almost imperceptible nod in your direction, slips out of the office and back into the main room. The muted thumping of the piano starts up again a moment later. His shift isn't over. Your interview has begun. The man, let's call him Silas. A name as hard and unyielding as the landscape outside doesn't ask for your name. He doesn't ask where you're from or about your journey. He doesn't care. He gets straight to business, laying out the rules of the house. This isn't a negotiation. It's a declaration. All right, he starts, steepling his fingers over his prominent belly. Here's how it works. You work the floor. You talk to the men. You laugh at their jokes. You make them feel welcome. You encourage them to drink. For every drink a man buys you, you get a token. He gestures to a small wooden box on his desk, filled with brass-colored coins. At the end of the night, you turn in your tokens, and you get a percentage of the take. Simple. It sounds simple, almost too simple. This is the classic percentage girl system, cornerstone of the saloon economy. On the surface, it seems like a commission-based job. The more you work, the more you charm, the more you earn. It presents a sliver of agency, feeling that your income is in your own hands. But this is the first of many deceptions, a beautifully constructed trap. The math is always in the house's favor. Now the drinks you'll be drinking, he continues, a slight curl to his lip, are special, too, mostly, colored water, doesn't matter. The customer pays full price for whiskey. You get your token, and we all make money. Understood, you nod. The mechanics of the G-rift becoming clearer. The house makes a massive profit selling colored water at whiskey prices, and you are the bait used to make the sale. This practice of serving fake drinks to the hostesses was widespread, and for a very practical reason. If you were to drink actual whiskey with every customer who bought you around, you would be dangerously intoxicated within an hour, rendering you useless to the establishment and vulnerable to the patrons. The cold tea was a tool of the trade, a way to maintain a veneer of conviviality while staying sober enough to work. It's a small, intimate deception, repeated hundreds of times a night in saloons all across the West. Damn. Silas gets to the fine print, the part that wasn't in the newspaper advertisement. Of course, he says, his voice casual, you'll be needing a place to stay. We have rooms upstairs. Very convenient. We'll put that on your tab. And you'll need food. We provide 1 meal a day from the kitchen. That goes on the tab too. He gestures towards your simple, travel-worn dress. And you can't work the floor in that. You'll need a proper dress. Something with a bit more color. We've got a selection. We'll find one that fits. Put it on the tab. The tab. The professor's warning echoes in your mind. This is the heart of the system. A mechanism of control far more effective than any lock and key. This is debt peonage. You haven't earned a single token yet. But you are already in debt. The prices for your room, your single daily meal, and the mandatory dress will be wildly inflated. The dress might be worth $5, but on Silas's ledger, it will be $25. The dingy room upstairs will cost more per week than a comfortable boarding house in the center of town, a town you don't know, where you have no contacts and no money to pay a deposit. You are being monetized from every possible angle. Your charm earns the house money. Your basic needs shelter, food, clothing also earn the house money. Your earnings are a trickle of brass tokens, while your debts are a flood of entries in his ledger. It's a system designed to ensure you can never quite get ahead, never save enough to leave. You are bound to the gilded cage not by chains, but by arithmetic. Historians are still piecing together the true extent of this exploitation, because these were verbal agreements. There are no written contracts to study. The evidence comes from anecdotal accounts, journal entries, and court records from the rare instances when a dispute spilled out into the open. The consensus is that for many, if not most, saloon women, escaping this debt was virtually impossible. It was a life sentence served one overpriced meal at a time. The question still debated is whether the women understood the full extent of this trap from the outset, or if the reality only dawned on them slowly, week by week, as they saw their earnings evaporate against their mounting tab. Silas leans forward, his tone shifting from instructional to menacing. There are the rules. You don't cause trouble. A customer gets out of line. You handle it or you call for Frank. He jerks a thumb toward the main room, presumably indicating a bouncer. You don't start fights with the other girls. And you are always on time. We open at noon. You're on the floor. We close when the last man leaves. You're on the floor. 6 days a week. Sundays we're closed. Out of respect, he adds, the hypocrisy's so thick it's almost funny. There's a chilling finality to his words. There's no sick leave, no personal days, no room for a bad mood. You are a part of the saloon's machinery, and you are expected to function flawlessly. The lack of a written contract is, itself, a powerful tool. It means the terms can change at any time, at his whim. There is no recourse, no one to appeal to. The law in a town like this is, at best, a suggestion, and it rarely sides with a percentage girl against a business owner who pays his informal taxes to the sheriff. He looks you over one more time, his assessment complete. All right, go on upstairs. Mary will find you. Get your dress. Your first shift starts in an hour. He dismisses you with a wave of his hand, already turning his attention to the ledger on his desk, where he will, no doubt, open a new page and write your name or whatever name he decides to give you at the top. You walk out of the office, back past the piano where the professor continues his tireless playing without a glance in your direction. The noise of the saloon washes over you again. But it sounds different now. It's no longer just a chaotic din. You can hear the mechanics of it. The clink of glasses is the sound of your potential earnings. The roar of laughter is the sound of the performance you are now required to give. The entire room has transformed from a place into a workplace. A stage where you have just been cast in a role with a script you didn't write and a price you have yet to fully understand. You head for the rickety staircase, each step taking you deeper into the cage. You reach the top of the rickety staircase and step onto a narrow, dimly lit landing. The air up here is even more stale than downstairs, thick with the smell of old wood, cheap perfume, and something vaguely like boiled cabbage. A woman is waiting for you. She's older than the girls you saw on the floor, maybe in her late 30s, with tired lines around her eyes that her heavy makeup can't quite conceal. This is Mary, the woman Silas mentioned. She holds the keys to the rooms and, in a way, the keys to your daily existence. You're the new one, she says. It's not a question. Her voice is flat, devoid of emotion. She's seen dozens of girls just like you pass through this landing. Come on, let's get you sorted. She leads you down the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the bare floorboard. It's here, in the quiet, grim reality of the second floor, that you begin to understand the unspoken social ladder of the gilded cage. Mary's what was often called the house mother or madam. Though her role is less maternal and more managerial, she's a former working girl herself, one who managed to survive long enough to graduate to a position of minor authority. She oversees the women, settles disputes, and reports directly to Silas. She is both a product of the system and a cog in its enforcement. Her survival depends on keeping the other girls in line. Mary explains the hierarchy to you, not in a formal speech, but through a series of blunt, practical instructions. At the very bottom are the waitress or dance hall girls. These are often the newest arrivals. Like you, your primary job is to work the main floor, circulating among the tables, pushing drinks. You're expected to dance with any man who asks, for a price, of course a price that is split with the house. The dancing itself is often clumsy and chaotic, more shuffling around in a tight space than any kind of elegant waltz. This is the entry-level position. Then there are the percentage girls. The role sign is described to you. This is a step up, though the line is blurry. You have a bit more autonomy in theory, choosing which customers to sit with, employing your charm to earn those brass tokens. This is where the real money, or what passes for it, is made. These women are the core of the business model. This brings us to a fascinating and often misunderstood aspect of saloon life: the variety of roles women played. The classic Hollywood image of the saloon girl lumps them all together. But in reality, there was a spectrum. Historians liken them. But Lure have done extensive work to detangle these roles. At one end, you had bona fide singers and actresses in the larger, more reputable variety theaters of cities like Denver or San Francisco. These were legitimate performers. At the other, much more common end of the spectrum, you had women whose entertainment was far more intimate and happened in the small rooms upstairs. The Gilded Cage, like most saloons, blurs these lines deliberately. The ambiguity is profitable, which leads to the unspoken top of the pyramid inside the saloon walls, the owner's favorite. There is often one girl who has the boss's particular protection. She gets the better dresses, the slightly less terrible room, and is shielded from the most difficult customers. This position is precarious, entirely dependent on the owner's whim, and it breeds a fierce, silent resentment among the other women. To them, she is both a symbol of success and a constant, bitter reminder of their own station. Mary stops in front of a door and unlocks it. As she does, another door down the hall opens, and a young woman, not much older than you, peeks out. Her hair is a brussy, artificial reed, and her eyes are sharp and calculating. She looks you up and down, a flicker of something assessment, rivalry in her gaze, before she disappears back into her room. "That's Lily," Mary says, without turning around. "Steer clear of her. She thinks she's queen of the castle." There it is. Your first taste of the internal politics. You haven't even started your first shift, and you've already been warned about people the boss and the unofficial queen bee. This sisterhood of the saloon is another area where historical reality clashes with popular myth. The movies often portray these women as a tight-knit family, a band of spunky outcasts who look out for each other. The truth is far more complex and often heartbreaking. Yes, moments of genuine kindness and camaraderie existed. A shared bar of soap, a mended tear in a dress, a quiet word of comfort after a particularly rough night. These small acts of grace were essential for survival. But the system was designed to pit you against each other. You are all in direct competition for the attention of the same limited pool of customers. Every token another girl earns is a token you did not. This creates an environment ripe for jealousy, suspicion, and betrayal. Historians are still debating the nature of these female relationships. Some accounts emphasize the rivalries and betrayals, painting a grim picture of isolated women fighting for scraps. Other sources, like personal letters and diaries, reveal deep and lasting friendships forged in the fire of shared hardship. The reality, most likely, is that it was both. Relationships could be intensely loyal one day and viciously competitive the next, shifting with the precarious fortunes of saloon life. It was a fragile sisterhood, a bond constantly tested by the pressures of the job. Mary pushes the door open and gestures for you to enter your new home. As she hands you the key, she lays down the final, unspoken rule of the hierarchy. "Silas runs the business," she says, her voice slow. "I run the girls. You have a problem with a customer. You come to me. You had a problem with another girl. You come to me. You try to go over my head to him. And you'll find your life gets a lot harder. Understand? It's a clear warning. Mary is the gatekeeper. She is your boss, your warden, and your only potential advocate, all rolled into one. Your relationship with her will define your daily life here. Pleasing Silas is about making money. Pleasing Mary is about survival. You step into the room, and she closes the door behind you, leaving you alone. You look around at the four walls that will now contain your life, and the full weight of the saloon's pecking order settles upon you. You are at the very bottom, a new fish in a very small, very murky pond. You have to navigate the customers downstairs in the minefield of alliances and rivalries up here. And everyone, from Silas to Mary to the brassy-haired Lily down the hall, is watching to see if you'll sink or swim. The door clicks shut behind you, and for the first time since stepping off the train, you are truly alone. The silence in the room is a stark contrast to the relentless noise that has defined your day. You stand in the center of your new home, and the bleakness of it slowly seeps into your bones. This is the place where you are supposed to rest, to recover, to find some semblance of peace. But the room itself feels like a punishment. It's tiny, calling it a room feels generous. It's more of a closet, a box. Historians often refer to these upstairs rooms in saloons as cribs, a term that perfectly captures their cramped, confining nature. You can stretch your arms out and almost touch both walls. The air is stuffy and smells of dust and damp linen. There is one small, grimy window, but it offers no picturesque view of the western landscape. It looks directly onto the filthy wall of the adjacent building, so close you could probably reach out and touch the rotting wood. What little light struggles through is grey and depressing. There is no privacy. The walls are paper thin. You can hear the muffled sounds of movement from the rooms on either side, a cough, a floorboard creaking. You can hear the distant, incessant thumping of the piano from downstairs, a constant reminder of the world that waits for you when the saloon is in full swing. You know that every shout of laughter, every argument, every note of that out-of-tune piano will travel up through the floorboards and permeate this space. There will be no escape from the noise. The furniture is sparse and grimly functional. There is a narrow bed pushed against one wall. The mattress is a thin, lumpy sack filled with straw or corn husks. You press down on it, and it rustles pathetically. It will offer little comfort after a long night on your feet. A single, threadbare blanket is folded at its base. Next to the bed is a small, rickety washed stand holding a ceramic bowl and a pitcher. The paint on the pitcher is chipped, revealing the grey clay beneath. This is your bathroom. There is no running water. Of course, you'll have to haul buckets of water up those steep stairs yourself, and the water will likely be cold. In the corner, there is a single wooden chair and a small chest of drawers. Its knobs mismatch. This is your entire storage space. You look at your own small trunk, which suddenly seems like a luxurious piece of luggage in comparison. There are no personal touches, no decorations, nothing to suggest that a human being lives here. It is as sterile and impersonal as a prison cell. This is not a home, it is a holding pen. This lack of personal space was a deliberate and powerful to love control. By providing such miserable living quarters, the owner, Silas, creates a subtle incentive for you to spend as little time in your room as possible. Your room is for sleeping, and little else. The life of the house is downstairs, on the main floor, where you can be earning and spending. It's a psychological nudge, a way of ensuring his employees are always at their posts. You can't retreat to a comfortable sanctuary because no sanctuary is provided. It's in a room like this that we find one of the more poignant and curious historical artifacts of the era the cigar box banked. With no secure place to keep their meager earnings, many saloon women would hide their money in secret stashes. A loose floorboard, a hollowed-out bedpost, or, most commonly, a simple cigar box hidden under the lumpy mattress. This was their escape fund. Their dream of a different life, saved one coin at a time. The existence of these secret banks is a testament to both their desperation and their enduring hope. It was an act of quiet rebellion in a system designed to leave them with nothing. You run a hand over the rough, unpainted wood of the wall. You can feel the vibrations from downstairs. You are physically inside the gilded cage. A part of its structure, this room isn't separate from the saloon, it's an extension of it. This is a crucial point that many historical depictions miss. They show the girls retreating upstairs as if it's a different world. But it's not. The business of the saloon bleeds into every corner of the building. The concept of privacy, as we understand it today, was a luxury few could afford in the 19th century, especially on the frontier. But for a saloon woman, the lack of privacy was profound. Your room was not truly your own. The lock on the door, for which Mary gave you a key, is a flimsy thing. It's understood that Mary, or Silas, can enter at any time, share them all. Your proximity to the other women means your life is an open book. They will hear you when you're sick. They will hear you when you weep. And they will certainly hear if you have a customer in your room for any reason. Historians still debate the precise nature of the work that went on in these upstairs cribs. In some respectable dance halls, the rooms were strictly for the girls to sleep in. In most establishments, however, the line was intentionally blurred. The cribs were often rented out by the hour for private conversations or other services, with the lion's share of the fee going directly to the house. The saloon girl often had little say in the matter. Refusing a customer's request for a private chat could mean losing her job. Whether this escalated beyond conversation was a constant, dangerous ambiguity. Your room was both your prison cell and a potential extension of your workplace. A knock at the door makes you jump. It's Mary, holding a dress. It's made of a garish red satin, with cheap black lace at the collar and cuffs. It's worn. You can see the faint sheen of wear on the fabric, and it smells faintly of someone else's perfume. This is your new uniform. This'll do for now, Mary says, her tongue leaving no room for argument. Silas has already put it on your tab. $20. $20. For a second-hand dress that probably cost $3. The professor's warning about the tab rings in your ears, louder and clearer now. You take the dress. The satin feels slick and cheap in your hands. This is the costume for the part you are about to play. Mary looks around the small, grim room, then back at you. For a fleeting moment, you see a flicker of something in her eyes. It's not pity, not exactly. It's a distant, hollow look of recognition, as if she's seeing a younger version of herself standing there. Then, just as quickly, it's gone, replaced by the same flat, managerial expression. Get changed, she says. You're on the floor in 30 minutes. She turns and leaves, her footsteps receding down the hall. The knock on your door feels useless. You are in your box. The cage is all around you. You hold the red satin dress in your hands. $20. The number echoes in your mind. A clear, cold signal of the trap you just walked into. Back east, $20 could have paid for a month's rent in a respectable boarding house. Here, it's the price of a single, second-hand dress that you're forced to wear. The debt is no longer an abstract concept, it has a weight in the texture. It feels like cheap satin. You take off your own simple, sturdy traveling clothes, the last remnants of your old life, and fold them neatly, placing them in one of the rickety drawers. They look out of place in this room. You pull the red dress over your head. It's a little too tight in the shoulders and a little too loose in the waist. It was clearly made for someone else, a ghost whose presence lingers in the fabric. You look at your reflection in the small, cloudy mirror above the washed sand. The person staring back at you is a stranger. A woman dressed in a costume, ready for a performance she doesn't know how to give. This transformation, this forced adoption of a new identity, was a key part of the process. The gaudy dress, the heavy makeup you'll soon be expected to wear, it all served to create a character, the saloon girl. This character was separate from the woman herself. It was a shield, a mask that allowed you to endure the nightly performance, But it also had a more insidious effect. It marked you, setting you apart from the respectable women of the town. Your clothing became a uniform that you couldn't easily take off, even when you left the swinging doors of the gilded cage behind. You head downstairs, your footsteps hesitant on the worn steps. The main room is even more crowded and chaotic than before. The sun has begun to set, and the lanterns have been lit, casting long, dancing shadows. The smoke is thicker, the noise louder. You see Mary near the bar, and she gives you a sharp, commanding nod. It's time. Your first task is simple: collect empty glasses. It's a way for you to get the lay of the land, to move through the room without having to engage too much. You pick up a heavy wooden rye and begin to navigate the crowded floor. Men turn to watch you, their conversations pausing for a beat. You can feel their eyes on you, on the red dress. You hear a low whistle from a table of miners. A gambler looks up from his cards and gives you a slow, deliberate smile. You keep your eyes down, focusing on the glasses, your face burning with a mixture of fear and humiliation. This is where the financial trap tightens its grip. You're already in debt for your room and your dress. Soon, you'll be hungry. The one meal a day provided by the house is, you will soon discover, a meager and unappetizing affair, usually a bowl of thin stew and a piece of stale bread. It's just enough to keep you working, but never enough to make you feel truly full. If you want anything more, an extra piece of bread, an apple, a cup of coffee in the morning, you have to buy it from the house at an inflated price, and it goes on the tab. This system of economic control is one of the most brutal, yet least sensational, aspects of your new life. It's not a dramatic showdown with a villain, it's a slow, grinding process of attrition. It's death by 1,000 cuts, or in this case, 1,000 entries in a ledger. Imagine your weekly earnings. You might earn, say, $10 in tokens a good week. But then the deductions begin. $5 for your room, $3 for your food. And then there are the other, more creative charges. $1 for laundry service, which is just Mary washing the dresses in a bucket out back there. 50 cents for a needle and thread to mend a tear. If you break a glass, you buy it. The charges are relentless. At the end of the week, you might find that your $10 in earnings has become a net loss. You owe Silas $2. Your debt has grown, not shrunk. This brings us to a particularly cruel and little-known aspect of the saloon economy: the fines. Owners would invent a list of house rules, and breaking them resulted in an immediate financial penalty. Talking back to a customer, that's a fine. Not smiling enough, a fine. Spilling a drink, a fine. Being late for your shift by 1 minute, a hefty fine. These rules were arbitrary and enforced at the owner's whim. They were designed to be broken. The fines were just another way to siphon your earnings back into the house's pockets, ensuring that the ledger, the true master of the gilded cage, was always fed. Historians are still uncertain about the exact profit margins of these establishments, as the bookkeeping was intentionally opaque. But it's clear that a significant portion of a saloon's income came not just from selling liquor, but from this internal, parasitic economy built on the backs of its female employees. The question debated is not whether this exploitation happened, but how systematic it was. Was it a conscious, carefully designed business model passed from one saloon owner to another, or was it simply the natural, ugly result of absolute power in an unregulated environment? The evidence suggests it was a bit of both, a common practice refined and perfected by ruthless entrepreneurs like Silas. You finish your round of collecting glasses, your tray heavy with sticky empties. You bring them to the bar, and the bartender, a grim-faced man you'll come to know only as Gus, grunts without looking at you. As you turn back to the floor, a hand sneaks out and grabs your wrist. It's a big man with a wild beard and the crazed look of someone who has spent too long staring at rocks. A prospector. Well now, he swears, his grip surprisingly strong. Look what we have here. Sit down, little lady. Have a drink with old Jed. This is it. Your first real test. You remember Silas's words you talked to the men. You laugh at their jokes. You try to pull your wrist away gently, but his grip tightens. Your heart pounds. This is the moment where the abstract rules of the house become a terrifying physical reality. You are paid to be pleasant. You are paid to be compliant. But where is the line? Where does the performance end and your own safety begin? You look around desperately, but no one seems to care. This is normal. This is part of the show. You are on your own. The prospector, Jed, yanks your wrist again, harder this time, trying to pull you down into the empty chair beside him. His breath is a foul wave of cheap booze and unbrushed teeth. Come on now, don't be shy, he growls, his voice a low rumble that grates on your nerves. Your mind is racing. Do you scream? Do you fight back? What are the consequences? A fine for causing trouble or worse? Just as panic begins to set in, you see a flicker of movement over Jed's shoulder. It's Lily, the woman with the brassy red hair from the hallway. She saunters over to your table, a practiced, almost bored sway in her hips. She places a hand on Jed's shoulder. Now, Jed, you old goat, she says. Her voice is smooth, syrupy contrast to his grovelly tone. You can't be scaring off the new talent on her first night. It's bad for business. She winks at him, a gesture that is both flirtatious and dismissive. Why don't you buy us all a round of the good stuff on you? Of course. Jed, momentarily distracted, loosens his grip on your wrist. He looks up at Lily, a slow, foolish grin spreading across his face. He is easily swayed, a big, clumsy bear being led by a ring in its nose. All right, Lily, he bellows. A round for my friends. Bartender, 3 whiskeys. Lily slides into the chair on the other side of Jed, seamlessly taking control of the situation. She gives you a quick, sharp look. It's a look that says, "Look, zone." You slip into the empty chair he had been trying to force you into, your wrist throbbing slightly. You are no longer the target, you are now part of the audience for Lily's performance. Gus, the bartender, brings over 3 small, thick-bottomed glasses filled with an amber liquid. 2 are placed in front of you and Lily, and 1 in front of Jed. Jed, in his drunken enthusiasm, grabs his glass and tosses the contents back in one gulp, slamming the empty glass down on the table with a satisfied roar. You watch Lily. She lifts her glass, gives Jed a theatrical toast, and takes a delicate, ladylike sip. You mimic her, bringing the glass to your lips. The liquid that touches your tongue is not whiskey. It's not even the colored water Silas mentioned. It's a weak, lukewarm tea, with a slightly bitter, metallic aftertaste. You manage to swallow it without grimacing. This is the special drink. This is the con. In action. The art of the saloon whiskey was a scam of magnificent proportions. In these remote frontier towns, genuine, aged whiskey from the East was expensive and hard to come by. What was served in places like the Gilded Cage was often a locally made concoction known by a variety of colorful names: tarantula juice, coffin varnish, or bottled courage. The recipe was simple and brutal. It started with raw, high-proof alcohol, essentially moonshine. To this, various ingredients were added to give it the current flavor of real whiskey: burnt sugar or caramel for an amber hue, a plug of chewing tobacco for a smoky taste and a bit of a kick. Sometimes, more sinister additives like cayenne pepper, strychnine in very small, non-lethal doses, or even rattlesnake heads were thrown into the barrel for an extra bite. This chemical cocktail was what the men were drinking. It was cheap to produce and highly profitable. It also got the customers drunk faster and often made them more aggressive and less rational, a state that was, paradoxically, good for business, as it led to more spending and less questioning of the bill. Historians and chemists who have analyzed the residue from 19th century bottles have confirmed the presence of some truly alarming substances. The men were slowly poisoning themselves for the sake of a good time. Your glass, however, contains only deception, but even this deception has its own set of rules. You must make it look real. You have to sip it, nurse it, make it last. If you drink it too quickly, The customer will just buy another round, and you'll be stuck at his table. If you don't drink it at all, he'll get suspicious. It's a delicate balancing act, a piece of theatre you perform a dozen times a night. Lily is a master of this theatre. She laughs at Jed's rambling stories about a mother lode he's about to discover. She leans in, as if sharing a secret, and encourages him to tell her more. With every word, she is stroking his ego, making him feel like the most important man in the room. And with every story, he orders another round. He is paying top dollar for her attention and for the privilege of drinking poison, while she drinks cold tea. For each of his drinks, a brass token will be discreetly dropped into a small pouch she has tied to her wrist. This entire interaction is a masterclass in the unwritten curriculum of your new job. You learn that direct confrontation is dangerous. The best tools are deflection, mystification, and a carefully deployed, artificial charm. You learn that your most valuable asset is not your looks, but your ability to manage the fragile male ego. You are not just a waitress or a dancer, you are a psychologist, a con artist, and an actress, all rolled into one. The question of whether the customers were really fooled by the cold tea is still a matter of some debate among historians. Some argue that many of the regulars were in on the joke. They knew the girls weren't drinking real whiskey, but they didn't care. The transaction wasn't really about sharing a drink. It was about purchasing companionship. The drink was just the currency, the excuse to sit with a woman for 15 minutes without having to state their lonely intentions plainly. Others maintained that in the dim, chaotic environment of the saloon, with their own senses dulled by tarantula juice, most men were completely oblivious. They were simply the marks in a very old and very effective con. Jed is getting louder and more sentimental now, his head rolling slightly. Lily catches your eye again and gives a subtle, almost imperceptible jerk of her head towards another part of the room. It's your cue. Your rescue is over. It's time for you to get back to work. You murmur an excuse about seeing to another customer, and you slip away from the table, leaving Lily to expertly manage the final stages of fleecing the old prospector. You didn't earn a single token from that encounter, but you received something far more valuable, a lesson in survival. And you learned that the whiskey bottle on the back bar is the source of two very different kinds of poison. You move away from Jed and Lily's stable, your heart still beating a little too fast. The brief, intense encounter has left you shaken, but also strangely enlightened. Lilith's intervention was a revelation. It wasn't an act of friendship, it was a display of professional competence. A demonstration of the tools required to survive on this floor. Now, you have to try and wield those tools yourself. You spend the next few hours in a state of high alert, your senses sharpened to a razor's edge. You begin to see the saloon not as a single, chaotic mass, but as a collection of small, volatile ecosystems. Each table is its own little world, with its own mood and its own potential dangers. You learn to read the room, to develop a kind of sixth sense for trouble. This is the unspoken, unwritten art of the saloon girl: situational awareness. It's a skill honed by necessity, a constant, low-level hypervigilance. You learn to listen not just to the words being said, but to the tone, the cadence, the slurring of speech that signals a man is moving from cheerfully drunk to dangerously unpredictable. You learn to watch their hands. Are they relaxed on the table? Are they clenching into fists? Are they drumming impatiently? A sign of growing agitation. You approach a table with 3 cattle drivers who have clearly just been paid. They are loud, boisterous, and throwing their money around. The trick here, you quickly realize, is to be bright, cheerful, and slightly out of reach. You laugh at a joke that isn't particularly funny. You flatter them on their probably exaggerated tales of life on the trail. You deftly avoid the hand that tries to snake around your waist as you lean over to pour a drink. It's a dance, a constant push and pull of feigned interest and subtle evasion. You make them feel charming while keeping them at a safe, professional distance. Then there's the table of gamblers in the corner. They are quiet, intense, and radiate a different kind of danger. They aren't interested in loud jokes or clumsy advances. They are men who live by their wits, and they expect the same from you. Here, the approach is different. You are quiet, observant, inefficient. You keep their glasses full without interrupting the flow of the game. You might offer a word of encouragement to a man on a winning streak, or a sympathetic glance to one who has just lost a big hand. You are a silent, comforting presence, part of the scenery of their high-stakes world. Flirting with these men is a bad idea. They are not here for that. They are here for the cards, and you are just part of the service. This ability to read and adapt to different types of men was perhaps the single most important skill for a saloon woman. It's a key point emphasized by historians who study the social dynamics of the frontier. A woman's success and, more importantly, her safety, depended on her ability to quickly categorize the men she encountered and adjust her performance accordingly. The lonely miner, the boastful cowboy, the slick gambler, the quiet homesteader on a rare trip to town each required a different mask, a different script. One of the more peculiar and challenging customers you'll encounter is the remittance man. This was a figure unique to the American West and other parts of the British Empire. A remittance man was typically the disgraced son of a wealthy European family, sent away to the colonies to avoid scandal back home. He was paid a regular allowance or remittance to stay away. These men were often educated and well-spoken, a stark contrast to the rough prospectors and cowboys. But they were also often deeply bitter, alcoholic, and prone to bouts of melancholic despair or sudden rage. They could be charming one moment and cruel the next. Dealing with them was like walking on eggshells. They craved a conversation that reminded them of their former life, but they resented you for being a part of their current. Following one, you find yourself sitting with one such man. He is handsome, in a dissipated sort of way, and speaks with a faint English accent. He doesn't want to joke or boast. He wants to quote poetry you've never read and complain about the crudeness of the town. You nod and listen, pretending to understand his references. You are, for these 15 minutes, a stand-in for a life he has lost. It's an exhausting performance, draining you more than the loud boisterousness of the cowboys ever could. He buys you 3 whiskeys in quick succession, not out of convivialia, but as a way of paying for your time. A transaction he understands. You take the tokens and move on, feeling a strange mix of pity and relief. The question of how these women navigated the constant threat of violence is a complex one, and historians still debate the effectiveness of their various strategies. Did a sassy comeback work, as it does in the movies? Or did it just provoke a man? Further, the historical consensus leans towards the latter. Direct confrontation was incredibly risky. The most successful strategy seems to have been what you are learning now, a combination of de-escalation, flattery, and strategic retreat. The goal was never to win an argument. The goal was to defuse the situation, extract the price of a few drinks, and get away before it could escalate. As the night wears on, you get better at the dance. You learn to use the physical space of the saloon to your advantage. You learn to keep a table between you and a particularly hands-wide customer. You learn to position yourself near the bar, within sight of Gus, or near the station of the house bouncer. You learn that a dropped tray, creating a sudden clatter and mess, can be a very effective way to break the tension and draw attention to a situation that is getting out of hand. These are the tricks of the trade. A silent language of self-preservation passed through observation rather than instruction. The night is a long, grueling marathon of forced smiles, cold tea, and constant, nerve-wracking vigilance. You are not just serving drinks, you are actively managing the emotional states of a room full of armed, intoxicated men. It's a high-wire act with no safety net, and with every successful navigation of a potentially dangerous encounter, you feel a small, grim sense of victory. You have survived another hour. You have earned another token. But the cost is a slow, steady erosion of your own spirit. As the night deepens, the air grows thicker, the laughter more desperate, and the potential for violence hangs in the smoky haze like a gathering storm. You're learning to manage the customers, but you're acutely aware that your own skills are a flimsy defense against a man truly determined to cause trouble. That's when you become more aware of another key figure in the saloon's ecosystem, the bouncer. In the gilded cage, his name is Frank. You saw Silas gesture towards him earlier. He is a mountain of a man, with a quiet, watchful demeanor that is far more intimidating than any loud-mouthed cowboy. He doesn't circulate. He doesn't talk to the customers. He simply stands, usually near the main entrance or at the end of the long bar, his arms crossed over his massive chest. His job is singular to be a physical deterrent. His presence is a constant, humming threat. It's a message to the patrons: have your fun, spend your money, but no, there is a line. And I am the one who draws it. For most of the night, he is a silent statue. But when trouble erupts, he moves with a surprising, brutal efficiency. You see it happen for the first time at the poker table. An accusation of cheating, a word, liar, hissed across the felt is followed by the scrape of a chair and the flash of a knife. Before anyone else can even react, Frank is there. He doesn't shout. He doesn't posture. He simply separates the two men, one massive hand on each man's chest. He disarms the man with the knife with a swift, practiced twist of the wrist. He speaks in a low, non-negotiable tone that you can't hear over the din, but the message is clear. A moment later, both men are being propelled towards the swinging doors. Frank doesn't throw them out, he ejects them, like a machine getting rid of faulty parts. Then, he returns to his post, his expression unchanged. The whole incident takes less than 10 seconds. In that moment, you feel a wave of relief. Frank is your protector. He is the thin line between a drunken argument and a deadly brawl. He is the reason a man's unwanted advance might stop at a grab of the wrist and not escalate further. The knowledge that he is there, a silent guardian, makes the tightrope walk of your job feel slightly less perilous. But then, as the night wears on, you begin to see the other side of Frank's role. He is not your employee. He is Silas's employee. His loyalty is not to you or to the other girls, it is to the house and its profits. Later in the evening, you see one of the other girls, a pale, nervous-looking woman named Sarah, in a heated, whispered argument with a wealthy-looking cattle baron. The man is insisting she accompany him upstairs. Sarah is refusing, her face tight with fear. The man's voice gets louder, more demanding. H.E.S. a high roller. A man who spends a lot of money at the gilded cage. You watch, expecting Frank to intervene, to step in and de-escalate as he did at the card table. Frank doesn't move. He sees the confrontation. He is clearly aware of it, but he remains at his post, his gaze fixed on some distant point. The cattle baron is a valuable customer. Sarah is a replaceable employee. The calculus is cold and simple. Frank's job is not to protect the girls from the customers, his job is to protect the business from disruptions. A card game knife fight is bad for business. A wealthy customer getting angry is also bad for business. But forcing a girl to comply with a customer's demands, that's just part of the business. This is the terrible dual nature of the saloon bouncer, or man catcher, as they were sometimes called. He was a necessary shield against the general chaos, but he was also the primary instrument of the owner's will. He was the enforcer of the house rules, not just against unruly patrons, but against the staff. If you were to defy Silas, if you were to refuse to work or try to leave without settling your tab, it would be Frank who would be sent to retrieve you. He is both your bodyguard and your jailer. The history of law enforcement on the frontier is complex, and figures like the bouncer occupy a gray area. In many towns, the official law, the sheriff or marshal, was understaffed, underpaid, or simply indifferent to what happened inside a saloon's swinging doors. As long as it didn't spill out into the street, the bouncer was the de facto law inside that building. His authority was absolute and backed by the threat of immediate physical violence. There was no appeal. Historians debate how formalized this role was. In larger city establishments, bouncers were salaried employees with a clear job description. In smaller, rougher places like the Gilded Cage, the bouncer might just be the biggest, Toughest guy the owner could hire. Sometimes paid in free drinks and a place to sleep. Some were former lawmen. Some were former criminals. What they all had in common was a capacity for violence and a loyalty that could be bought. One of the more curious, niche facts about bouncers is the variety of non-lethal weapons they often employed. While many carried firearms, using one was often a last resort. A dead body meant a closed saloon and a lot of questions from the sheriff. More common were weighty clubs known as slum shots or billy clubs, brass knuckles, or simply their own formidable fists. The goal was to incapacitate, not to kill. To remove a problem, not create a bigger one. They were masters of what we might today call less lethal force, applied with brutal precision. You watch as Mary, the house mother, finally steps in and intervenes with Sarah and the cattle baron. She placates them out, promises him a free bottle of champagne, and leads a trembling Sarah away from the table. The problem is solved, not by the physical force of the bouncer, but by the managerial diplomacy of the house mother. Frank never moved a muscle. The lesson is sharp and clear. Frank is not your ally. He is a tool, and you are not the one who wields him. His protection is conditional, based entirely on Silas's business interests. He will protect you from a penniless drifter who is causing a scene. He will not protect you from a wealthy patron who sees you as part of a transaction. You are on your own, caught between the unpredictable aggression of the customers and the cold, calculated interests of the house. Frank, the silent mountain of a man by the door, is just another part of the cage. His presence isn't for your safety, it's for the safety of the business. And you are just one of its disposable assets. The night grinds on, a seemingly endless loop of forced smiles, clinking glasses, and the relentless pounding of the professor's piano. It's well past midnight now, but the gilded cage shows no signs of quieting down. For the miners and cowboys, the night is still young. For you, every minute feels like an hour. A profound, bone-deep weariness has set in, a fatigue that is more than just physical. It's a mental and emotional exhaustion, brought on by the constant, grinding noise. The noise. It's the one aspect of this life that the romantic stories and silent films never prepare you for. It is a physical entity, a constant pressure on your skull. It's not just the volume, it's the quality of the sound. It's a chaotic soup of competing noises, none of which are pleasant. The out-of-tune piano provides a frantic, jarring melody line. Underneath that, there's the percussive rhythm of stomping boots, slamming glasses, and the sharp crack of billiard balls. The melody is the slurred, shouting voices of 100 different conversations, none of which you can quite make out, blending into a single, meaningless roar. This constant auditory assault has a profound psychological effect. It frays your nerves, making it impossible to think clearly. It creates a state of perpetual tension, a feeling that something is always about to happen. There is no peace, no respite, even when you get a brief moment to stand by the bar and catch your breath. The wall of sound is inescapable. It follows you, surrounds you, seeps into you. This experience, the sensory overload of the saloon, is something historians have tried to reconstruct through written accounts. Diaries and letters from the period often mention the din or the cacophony, but it's hard for words to capture the sheer, oppressive reality of it. It was an environment designed to overwhelm the senses, to break down inhibitions through sheer exhaustion. A man who can no longer hear himself think is less likely to question the price of his next drink or the wisdom of his next bet. But the noise isn't just downstairs. When your grueling shift finally ends, not at a set time, but whenever Silas decides the last profitable customer has gone, you climb the stairs to your tiny crib, desperate for silence. But the silence never comes. The moons are, as you suspected, little more than thin wooden membranes. You can hear everything. You can hear the woman in the next room, Lily, huffing, the dry, persistent hack that speaks of cheap cigars and long irritation. You can hear the woman on the other side, Sarah, weeping softly into her pillow, the sound a heartbreaking counterpoint to the fading chaos from downstairs. even after the last customer is gone and the doors are locked. The saloon is not quiet. There is the sound of Gus the bartender cleaning up, the clatter of him stacking bottles. There are the snores and drunken mutters of the men who were too intoxicated to make it home and are now passed out on the tables, a common sight you'll have to learn to step over in the morning. Sometimes you can hear the low, angry voice of Silas counting his earnings in his office, arguing with Mary about the night state. The building itself seems to grow unsettled, a living creature sighing after a long, hard night. The concept of a quiet night's sleep becomes a forgotten luxury, a memory from a distant life. This is a form of deprivation that is subtle but incredibly effective. Sleep deprivation, as we now know, affects judgment, mood, and physical health. By creating an environment where true rest is impossible, the saloon system keeps its workers in a perpetual state of exhaustion, making them more pliable, less likely to resist, and less capable of planning an escape. One of the strangest and most debated sources of noise, according to some historical accounts, was the hurdy-gurdy. While the professor's piano was the standard, some of the rougher, less reputable establishments, particularly those catering to specific immigrant groups, featured hurdy-gurdy players. These were not the quaint, organ-grinding instruments you might imagine. They were often loud, wheezing, and played with a frantic energy by women who were also expected to dance with the patrons. The term hurdy-gurdy house became synonymous with the lowest, most chaotic tier of saloons. Whether the Gilded Cage ever had one is unknown, but the principle is the same. The music was there to create noise, not art. The lack of silence affects your waking hours as well. There is no quiet space for you to read a letter from home, assuming you were brave enough to have one sent here. There is no corner where you can sit and have a private, whispered conversation with another girl. The saloon owns your time, your body, your debts, and it even owns your silence. Every moment is lived publicly, audibly. This leads to a peculiar psychological state that scholars of carceral environments or other high-stress institutions would recognize. You start to crave silence like a drug. You find yourself focusing on the tiny, fleeting moments of near quiet, the brief pause after a song ends before the next one begins. The momentary lull in conversation when a gambler lays down a winning hand. These tiny gaps in the wall of noise become your only sanctuary. You lie in your lumpy bed, the thin blanket pulled up to your chin. The phantom sounds of the saloon echo in your ears, a phenomenon known today as auditory PRI. You can still hear the piano, even though it has stopped. You can still hear the laughter, even though the room downstairs is empty save for sleeping drunks. The noise has gotten inside your head. You realize that this is one of the most insidious parts of the cage. It's not just the physical confinement of the building or the economic confinement of the debt. It's the sensory confinement. The saloon colonizes your senses, reshaping your perception of the world until the constant, jarring noise feels normal, and the memory of true, peaceful silence feels like a dream. You press your thin pillow over your ears, a futile gesture. The noise is already in the room. It's in the world. It's in you. And you know, with a dreadful certainty, that you will have to wake up and face it all again in just a few short, unrestful hours. Weeks bleed into months. The initial shock of your arrival has faded, replaced by a grim, monotonous routine. You wake up tired. You work tired. You go to bed tired. The faces of the men start to blur together, a rotating cast of drunkenness and desperation. You've mastered the art of the cold tea deception, the forced smile, and the strategic retreat. You've learned to navigate the floor of the Gilded Cage. Now, you must learn to navigate the far more treacherous landscape of the second-floor hallway. Your relationships with the other women, Lily, Sarah, and a handful of others are a complex and constantly shifting web of alliance and rivalry. This is not the supportive, ride-or-die sisterhood of Hollywood legend. It is a fragile, pragmatic ecosystem born of shared trauma and fierce competition. On the surface, there are small, crucial acts of kindness, These are the moments that make the life bearable. One morning, you wake up with a hacking cough, your throat raw from the smoke-filled air. Sarah, the quiet, nervous girl, leaves a cup of hot water with a spoonful of honey outside your door. She doesn't knock. She doesn't say a word. It's a silent gesture of solidarity. Another time, the cheap lace on your red satin dress rips. Lily, the unofficial queen bee, appears in your doorway, not with a smoke, but with a needle and thread. You can't working like that, she says, her tone brisk and businesslike. It's bad for everyone's earnings. She sits on your bed and mends the tear with quick, efficient stitches. These moments are lifelines. They are whispered conversations in the hallway, sharing information about which customers are dangerous, which ones are generous, and which ones are just lonely. It's the sharing of a bit of rouge when someone runs out, or the lending of a shawl a particularly cold night. These acts build a fragile sense of community, a recognition that you are all, in some fundamental way, in this together. But underneath this thin layer of camaraderie runs a deep, cold current of competition. You are all rivals. Every token a man spends on Lily's company is a token he is not spending on yours. Every moment he is captivated by Sarah's shy smile is a moment he is not looking at you. This economic reality is the poison that seeps into every interaction. The competition manifests in subtle, cutting ways. It can be a misplaced hairpin right before a shift. It can be a quiet, venomous rumor whispered to a talkative customer. Watch out for the new girl. Someone might say, I hear she's a thief. It's a battle fought not with fists, but with whispers and sabotage. You quickly learn to be wary, to keep your few personal belongings locked in your trunk, and to trust no one completely. This complex dynamic is something historians have worked hard to uncover, moving beyond the simplistic tropes, using court records from petty theft accusations, letters home that hint at betrayals, and the occasional candid newspaper report. They've pieced together a picture of a social world governed by a ruthless pragmatism. Alliances were temporary and based on mutual benefit. A friend one week could be a rival the next, if circumstances changed. A fascinating and bizarre example of this competitive environment can be found in what was known as the pretty waiter girl phenomenon in some of the more theatrical saloons. Owners would actively encourage and even stage rivalries between the women, billing them like prize fighters. Advertisements would praise the beauty of one waiter girl over another, inviting customers to come in unjudged for themselves and spend their money doing so. This turned the subtext of competition into a literal marketing strategy, profiting from the women's mutual animosity. You experience this tension firsthand. One evening, a wealthy rancher, a whale as the gamblers would call him, comes into the saloon. He's known to be a big spender and a generous tipper. Immediately, the atmosphere on the floor shifts. It is silent and declared race. Every woman in the room is trying to catch his eye, to be the one he beckons to his table. Lily uses her bold, confident charm. Sarah uses her quiet, damsel in distress appeal. You try your own blend of politeness and attentive service. It is subtle, desperate audition when the rancher finally chooses Lily, inviting her to his table for the entire evening. You feel a sharp, bitter sting of disappointment. It's not just about the lost income. It feels like a personal failure. And as you pass Lily's table later, she gives you a small, triumphant smile that feels more like a slap in the face than a friendly gesture. The most debated aspect of this fragile sisterhood is the question of solidarity against the owners. Did the women ever band together to demand better conditions or fairer pay? The evidence for organized action is incredibly scarce. The system was designed to prevent it. The constant competition, the fear of being fired and cast out with no resources, and the presence of enforcers like Frank and managers like Mary all worked to suppress any collective dissent. Furthermore, the transient nature of the work meant that the community was always in flux. Women came and went, making it difficult to build the long-term trust necessary for a strike or protest. Instead of open rebellion, their resistance was small and personal. It was the act of hiding a few tokens from the nightly count. It was the shared knowledge of how to water down a customer's drink just a little bit more, to make the expensive bottle last longer. It was a secret language of eye rolls and gestures, a silent commentary on the absurdity and injustice of their world, shared right under the noses of their bosses. You learn to live in this state of duality. You learn to accept the cup of honey from Sarah in the morning and to compete fiercely with her for a customer's attention that night. You learn to be grateful for Lila's help with your dress while also guarding yourself against her ambition. This is the reality of the sisterhood. It's not a warm, comforting blanket, it's a tattered, patched-together quilt, offering just enough warmth to survive the night, but full of holes that let the cold, hard wind of reality blow right through. It's a bond forged in a crucible, and it's as beautiful and as brittle as fire-forged glass. One evening, a different kind of energy ripples through the gilded cage. The usual chaotic din softens for a moment. Conversations dip to a murmur. The reason for the change pushes through the swinging doors. It's the town sheriff. He's a tall man with a drooping mustache and a tarnished silver star pinned to his vest. He doesn't look like the heroic lawman of dime novels. He looks tired and slightly bored, like a man just trying to get through his day. For a fleeting moment, you feel a spark of hope. The law, a symbol of order, of justice. Maybe he's here to inspect the place, to ensure things are being run properly, to offer some semblance of official protection. You imagine him confronting Silas about the watered-down whiskey or the exploitative labor practices. It's a naive, foolish thought, and it evaporates almost immediately. The sheriff doesn't scan the room with a watchful, official eye. He ambles over to the bar, greets Gus with a familiar nod, and orders a beer. He pays for it. He then takes his drink and finds an empty table, settling in like any other customer. Silas emerges from his back office, wipes his hands on his apron, and joins the sheriff. They don't talk like a business owner and a regulator. They talk like old friends, laughing and sharing a quiet joke. This is your introduction to the true nature of law and order on the frontier. The sheriff is not here to enforce abstract ideals of justice. He's here to maintain a fragile, pragmatic peace. And his relationship with a man like Silas is a key part of that. The gilded cage, for all its grime and sin, is a vital part of the town's economy. It's where the miners and cowboys and ranchers spend their money, which then flows out into the town's other businesses. It's also a convenient containment vessel for the town's more unruly elements. As long as the trouble stays inside the saloon's walls, the sheriff is generally content to let Silas and Frank handle it. The sheriff's inspection is, in reality, essential call, a way of collecting informal dues. Silas likely provides him with a steady stream of revenue, a licensing fee, or a protection tax that never makes it into the town's official coffers. In return, the sheriff looks the other way. He ignores the gambling, the likely illegal liquor, and the well-known fact that the women upstairs are trapped in a cycle of debt. He is not the enemy of the system, he is a silent partner. This symbiotic relationship between saloon owners and local law enforcement is a well-documented historical reality. Sheriffs were often unelected officials, and a powerful business owner like Silas could wield significant influence, ensuring his preferred candidate won. In some cases, the lines were even more blurred. The famous lawman Wyatt Earp and his brothers were known to be saloon owners, gamblers, and lawmen all at once. Their business interests and their official duties hopelessly entangled. The idea of an impartial, incorporate officer of the law was largely a myth, a story people told themselves to feel safe. You watch as the sheriff sits there, sipping his beer. A man at a nearby table gets too loud, and the sheriff doesn't even flinch. It's Frank, the bouncer, who quietly moves over and has a word with the man. The sheriff's job is not to police the saloon, but to police the town. As long as Silas prevents the chaos from spilling onto the street, the sheriff is satisfied. This brings up a curious and often overlooked legal aspect of the saloon girls' life: vagrancy laws. These were broad, catch-all statutes that made it illegal to be unemployed or without a visible means of support. These laws were a powerful tool that could be used selectively. A respectable woman who had fallen on hard times might be treated with pity. A saloon girl, however, was a prime target. Even though you are working, your profession is considered immoral. If you were to be fired, or if you were to flee the gilded cage, you could be arrested for vagrancy. The penalty was often a fine you couldn't possibly pay, which would then be worked off through forced labor, sometimes for the town, sometimes for a local businessman who paid the fine for you. A businessman, perhaps, like Silas. He was another trap, another way the system ensured there was no escape. The law was not your friend. It was another bar on the cage. Historians are still debating the extent to which these laws were used to control and intimidate saloon women specifically. The records are often vague, listing charges simply as vagrancy or immorality. But the anecdotal evidence suggests it was a constant, looming threat. The sheriff's presence in the saloon is not a comfort, it's a reminder of this. He holds the power to arrest you, to have you declared a vagrant, and to effectively hand you right back to the man who exploits you. His friendly chat with Silas is a demonstration of power, a quiet affirmation of the town's true hierarchy. Later in the evening, the sheriff gets up to leave. As he passes your table, he pauses. He looks at you, his eyes holding a mixture of pity and professional indifference. He doesn't say a word. He just gives a slight tip of his hat and walks out, pushing through the swinging doors and disappearing into the night. The interaction, brief as it was, chills you to the bone. In his eyes, you saw your own reflection. You are not a citizen to be protected. You are part of the scenery, a fixture in an establishment that he has a vested interest in maintaining. You are a problem that is, for the moment, being properly managed. The hope you felt when he first walked in now seems incredibly naive. You understand now that if you were to scream for help, if you were to run out into the street and plead for justice, the man with the star would be the one to drag you right back inside. The law has been here, and it has inspected the situation, and it has found everything to be perfectly in order. The daily grind of noise, exhaustion, and emotional labor begins to take a physical toll. You notice a persistent cough settling deep in your chest. You see that the other girls, beneath their heavy makeup, have a pale, sallow look to their skin. Minor ailments, a cold, a headache, a stomach bug are constant companions. But there is a greater, more terrifying fear that haunts the upstairs hallway. A fear whispered about but rarely named, the unseen plague. In an environment like the gilded cage, disease spreads with terrifying speed. You are in constant close contact with dozens of people from all walks of life, miners from crowded bunkhouses, travelers from distant towns, men whose standards of hygiene are, to put it mildly, non-existent. The building itself is a breeding ground for sickness. The Shan water pitcher, the unwashed glasses, the filthy sawdust on the floor, every surface is a potential vector for transmission. Common illnesses like influenza or tuberculosis could sweep through the saloon, taking down girls one by one. If you get sick, there is no sympathy. There are no sick days. Silas sees illness not as a human misfortune, but as a business liability. A sick girl cannot work. A sick girl cannot earn tokens. A sick girl is a drain on resources. Your value is directly tied to your physical health, and the moment that falters, your position becomes precarious. You learn to hide your symptoms, to push through the fever and the aches, to paint a smile over your misery, because the alternative is to be cast out. But the common illnesses, as dangerous as they were not the most dreaded threat. The true terror was venereal disease. Syphilis and gonorrhea were rampant on the frontier. A silent epidemic that thrived in the transient, male-dominated society of the West. For the women of the saloon, who were often coerced or forced into physical intimacy with customers, the risk of infection was extraordinarily high. This is the grim reality that the romanticized myths of the saloon girl studiously ignore. An infection was not just a medical problem, it was a death sentence for your career and, very often, for your life. The initial symptoms might be hidden or ignored, but the diseases were progressive and, In the case of syphilis, devastating. They led to chronic pain, disfigurement, madness, and eventually, a slow and agonizing death. You see the fear of it in the other girl's eyes. You see it in the obsessive, almost ritualistic way some of them wash from their pitchers of cold water. You hear it in the hushed, frightened whispers about a girl in a town down the railway line who went mad and had to be locked away. The threat is invisible, but it is everywhere. One of the most tragic and little-known facts about this epidemic is its effect on childbirth. In the rare event that a saloon woman became pregnant and carried a child to term, congenital syphilis could be passed from mother to child, resulting in stillbirths or children born with severe health problems. For a woman trapped in this life, even the hope of a child was tainted by the constant shadow of disease. The historical evidence for the prevalence of these diseases is overwhelming. Army medical records from frontier posts show staggering rates of infection among soldiers, who were primary patrons of saloons. Skulls found in old frontier cemeteries have been analyzed by paleopathologists, revealing the telltale pitting and scarring of late-stage syphilis. It was a public health crisis with no public health response. What medical care was available was rudimentary at best, and often dangerous in its own right. There were no antibiotics. The primary treatment for syphilis was mercury. Patients were given mercury pills, rubbed with mercury ointments, or even made to inhale mercury vapor. The cure was, in many ways, as terrible as the disease, leading to horrific side effects like tooth loss, kidney failure, and neurological damage. The saying "one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury" was a grimly accurate summary of the situation. Historians still debate the level of medical knowledge among the women themselves. Did they understand the mechanisms of transmission? Did they know about preventative measures? The general consensus is that their knowledge was a confusing mix of folklore, old wives' tales, and snippets of correct information. They were operating in a fog of ignorance and fear, largely at the mercy of forces they couldn't see or understand. One day, you notice that Sarah, the quiet girl from down the hall, has stopped coming down for her shifts. At first, Mary, the house mother, says she is just under the weather. But a day turns into 2, then 3. The other girls fall silent when you ask about her. A curtain of fear and denial has been drawn around her room. You know, with a sinking feeling, what this means. She has contracted something serious. You no longer hear her soft weeping at night. You only hear a dreadful, ominous silence from behind her door. She has been quarantined, isolated not for her own health, but to protect the investment of the other girls. She has crossed the line from asset to liability. Her fate is now sealed. She will not recover. Silas will not waste money on a doctor, and certainly not on the expensive and toxic mercury treatments. She will be kept in her room until she either wastes away or is quietly sent away, perhaps to a charity hospital in a larger city if she's lucky, or simply left on the steps of a church if she's not. Her name will be struck from the ledger. Her meager belongings will be disposed of, and a new girl, fresh off the train with a head full of false promises, will be put in her room. The machinery of the gilded cage will grind on, barely noticing her absence. The silence from Sarah's room is louder than any noise the saloon can produce. It is the sound of your own possible future. It is the sound of the unseen plague made real, and it transforms your daily anxieties about debt and drunken customers into a much deeper, more primal fear, the fear of your own body betraying you, and of being discarded like a broken piece of furniture. The silence from Sarah's room becomes a heavy, oppressive presence in the upstairs hallway. The fear it creates is a tangible thing, a cold dread that seeps under the doors and into your own small crib. It is in this atmosphere of quiet terror that you first hear whispers of the doctor. He isn't a real doctor, not in any sense we would understand today. HES, a traveling salesman, a poet, a man who moves from one desperate frontier town to the next, peddling hope in a bottle. These figures, often calling themselves professor or doctor, were a common feature of the 19th century landscape. preying on the sick and the desperate in an era before medical regulation. One afternoon, he arrives in town, setting up a small, colorful tent in the muddy street. He is a charismatic man with a booming voice and a flashy suit, a stark contrast to the dusty, weary townsfolk. He unfurls a large banner depicting before and after images of miraculous recoveries, his voice echoing through the town as he extols the virtues of his signature product drive, Salowas Great Western Panacea and Blood Purifier. He claims it can cure anything: consumption, diarrhea, rheumatism, liver complaints, female troubles, and in a lower, more conspiratorial term diseases of a private nature. He is selling a miracle, and in a place like this, where real medical help is non-existent and the fear of disease is constant, miracles are a hot commodity. You see some of the other girls watching him from the saloon's upper windows. Their expressions a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. The allure of a quick, secret cure is powerful. It's a chance to erase a mistake, to rewind the clock, to buy back one's health and, therefore, one's livelihood. Later that day, you see Lily slip out of the saloon, a few precious coins clutched in her hand. She returns a short time later with a small, dark-colored bottle, which she quickly hides in her room. She doesn't have symptoms, not that you can see, but she is buying insurance. She is trying to arm herself against the unseen plague. It's a transaction born of pure fear. This reliance on patent medicines is one of the most tragic chapters in 19th century medical history. These cures were, at best, ineffective, and at worst, actively harmful. Their contents were a proprietary secret, but later analysis has revealed what was really inside these bottles. The primary ingredient was almost always alcohol, often in very high concentrations. A dose of the panacea was essentially a stiff shot of whiskey, which would make the patient feel temporarily better, creating the illusion that the medicine was working. Beyond the alcohol, the recipes were a bizarre and dangerous cocktail of ingredients. Opiates, like laudanum or morphine, were common, as they dulled pain and created a sense of euphoria. Cocaine was another popular additive, providing a burst of energy. Some blood purifiers contained harsh laxatives or diuretics, which would violently cleanse the system, a physical ordeal that sufferers mistook for the medicine fighting the disease. Others contained the very poisons they were meant to combat, like small amounts of mercury or arsenic, operating on a folk medicine principle of fighting fire with fire. You are essentially buying a bottle of cheap booze laced with narcotics and trace amounts of poison, sold to you by a con man in a fancy suit. But in the face of a terrifying, incurable disease, the lie is more comforting than the truth. The history of these patent medicines is fascinately intertwined with the history of advertising. The quack doctors were masters of marketing. Their newspaper ads, their public demonstrations, their sensational testimonials all were designed to bypass logic and appeal directly to fear and hope. They created a brand identity and a loyal customer base in an era long before Madison Avenue. A particularly strange and debated aspect of this world is the role of electric remedies. Some traveling doctors would have complex, intimidating-looking machines with wires and dials. They would claim to cure ailments by passing a harmless, low-voltage electrical current through the body. It was pure theater, a way of using the public's fascination with the new science of electricity to lend a veneer of legitimacy to their quackery. Whether these devices ever made it to a place as remote as the Gilded Cage is unlikely, but it speaks to the boundless creativity of the medical con artist. A few days later, the inevitable happens. Marie, the house mother, makes a quiet, desperate visit to the man in the tent. She is trying to save Sarah, or more accurately, she is trying to save Silas's investment in Sarah. She comes back with a large bottle of the panacea. The attempt is futile. Sarah is too far gone for even the euphoric effects of alcohol and opiates to make a difference. The miracle cure fails. The quack doctor knows his business model depends on not overstaking his welcome. before the townspeople can realize that his panacea has cured no one. Before the initial hope sours into angry disillusionment, he packs up his tent, his banner, and his remaining bottles, and he disappears, moving on to the next town, the next collection of desperate souls. He leaves behind him nothing but a handful of empty bottles and shattered hopes. The episode with the doctor is a sobering lesson. You realize that even if you could save enough money to seek help, there is no real help to be found. The world outside the gilded cage is just as dangerous and full of lies as the world inside it. There is no cavalry coming to the rescue. There is no miracle cure. Sarah's door remains closed. The bottle of drive, Salowas panacea sits, half empty, on the floor outside her room, a monument to a failed hope. You look at it and feel a profound sense of hopelessness. You are trapped not just by debt and by the walls of the saloon, but by the medical ignorance of the age itself. The cage is bigger than you ever imagined. It's the entire world. The fate of Sarah serves as a grim, constant reminder of your precarious existence, her eventual, quiet disappearance from the room down the hall. No goodbyes, no funeral. Just an empty space and a freshly changed straw mattress leaves a chill that 100 glasses of whiskey can't warm. It solidifies a painful truth within the walls of the gilded cage. You are a commodity. Outside of them, you are something even worse, a ghost. On your one day off, Sunday, the saloon is closed. The enforced silence is both a relief and a source of anxiety. It's your only chance to step out of the grimy, smoke-filled world of the gilded cage and into the town itself. You put on your own simple dress, the one you arrived in, hoping it will act as a kind of camouflage, allowing you to blend in, but it's a futile effort. You walk down the main street, and the change in atmosphere is immediate and visceral. The men who, just last night, were laughing with you, buying you drinks, and telling you their secrets, now avert their eyes. They walk past you on the street with a hurried step, a tip of the hat that is more dismissal than greeting. Some might offer a tight, embarrassed smile. In the harsh light of day, they are husbands, fathers, and members of the community. They are respectable men, and you are a reminder of their Saturday night. To acknowledge you would be to acknowledge a part of their lives they prefer to keep hidden in the smoky gloom of the saloon. But it's the reaction of the town's respectable women that is the most painful. As you pass by the general store or the church, they gather their skirts and pull their children a little closer, as if you are carrying a contagious disease which, in a way, they believe you are, a disease of morality. They don't speak to you. They don't look at you. They look through you. Their gaze is a wall of ice. You are invisible, a spectre haunting the edge of their proper world. This social ostracism was one of the heaviest burdens a saloon woman had to bear. She was a central, even vital, part of the town's social and economic life. Yet she was utterly excluded from its community. She was a pariah, living in a state of internal exile. She could see the world of families, of church socials, of quilting bees, but she could never, ever be a part of it. This hypocrisy is a recurring theme in the history of the American West. Frontier towns were built on a foundation of industries mining, ranching, logging that were overwhelmingly male. Saloons, gambling halls, and the women who worked in them were a necessary release valve for this population. The town's founding fathers and businessmen understood this. They profited from it. Yet, they simultaneously upheld a strict, Victorian moral code that condemned the very services they deemed essential. The saloon girl was trapped in this contradiction, necessary but reviled, visible but invisible. You feel this contradiction with every step you take. You see a family leaving the small wooden church, the parents holding their children's hands, and a profound, aching loneliness washes over you. It's a longing for a life that feels impossibly distant, a life of simple, ordinary acceptance. You are a public figure in the most private of ways, and a private person with no public standing. One of the curious historical details that illustrates this divide is the ladies' entrance. Some of the larger, More upscale saloons or hotels had a separate, discreet side entrance for women. This was not for the saloon girls. It was for the respectable wives of the town's elite, allowing them to, for instance, go to the hotel's dining room without having to walk through the main bar and be exposed to its rough clientele. The very architecture of the buildings reinforced the social segregation. The gilded cage, of course, has no such feature. There is only one entrance, and you are expected to use it. Historians are still debating the psychological impact of this level of social stigma. How did it shape a woman's identity and her view of herself? Some accounts suggest that many women internalized the shame, seeing themselves as fallen and beyond redemption. Others suggest that the ostracism fostered a defiant, countercultural identity, a sense of pride in their outcast status. They created their own world with its own rules, because the respectable world would not have them, most likely. For a woman like you, the feeling was a confusing mixture of both a deep well of shame punctuated by flashes of defiant anger. You wandered to the edge of town, where the muddy streets give way to the vast, indifferent prairie. You look back at the collection of wooden buildings. From here, it looks small and fragile. You see the church steeple, the roof of the general store, and the false front of the gilded cage, all huddled together. It is a community that needs you and despises you in equal measure. Your day off, your one chance to escape, only serves to reinforce the reality of your imprisonment. The cage is not just the saloon, it's the entire town. The bars are not made of iron, they are made of judgment, of whispers, of averted gazes. You realize you are safer inside the gilded cage. In there, at least, the rules are clear. You know who you are and what is expected of you. In there, you are a performer with a role to play. Out here, in the bright, unforgiving sunlight, you are nothing. You are a ghost. With a heavy heart, you turn your back on the prairie and walk back towards the saloon. Its swinging doors, which once seemed so menacing, now look almost like a refuge. It is the only place in this entire town that will welcome you. It is the only place you can call home. The thought is so profoundly sad that it steals the breath from your lungs. The day of rest has brought you no peace, only a clearer, more painful understanding of the invisible walls that surround your life. Life settles into a grim rhythm. The days and weeks marked not by a calendar, but by the ebb and flow of customers and the slow, relentless growth of your debt. But the frontier is a place of constant flux, and sometimes the routine is broken by a strange and unexpected proposition. One day, Mary takes you aside. A miner, one who has recently struck a small but significant pocket of silver, has made a special request. He lives in a remote cabin a few miles out of town, working his claim alone. The isolation has gotten to him. He doesn't just want an hour of company, he wants a wife. For a meet. He is willing to pay handsomely. The sum he offers Silas is astronomical by your standards. Enough to potentially clear a large chunk of your debt in one fell swoop. He will provide food and lodging. Your job, Mary explains, is to live with him, cook for him, keep his cabin tidy, and provide companionship. The last word hangs in the air, its meaning both vague and terrifyingly specific. This arrangement, often referred to by historians as a miner's marriage or temporary wife, was a strange and desperate institution born of the unique social conditions of the frontier. In mining camps and remote homesteads, men vastly outnumbered women. The loneliness was profound, a sickness of the soul, as one diocesan put it. For a man who had suddenly come into money, the desire for a domestic life, even a temporary, purchased one, could be overwhelming. For a woman like you, the proposition is a complex and dangerous gamble. On one hand, it's a chance to escape the noise and chaos of the saloon for a few days. It's a chance to breathe air that isn't thick with smoke. Most importantly, it's a chance to make a significant dent in the ledger that chains you to Silas. The possibility of freedom, even a slightly closer version of it, is a powerful lure. On the other hand, The risks are enormous. You would be leaving the relative safety of the town and the flawed, conditional protection of Frank and the other saloon patrons. You would be completely isolated, miles from anyone who could help you, utterly at the mercy of a single man. You have seen this miner in the saloon. He's quiet, but there's an intensity in his eyes that makes you uneasy. What kind of man is he when HES not performing for a crowd? What happens if HES cruel or violent? There would be no one to call for, no one to intervene. The choice, of course, is not really yours to make. Silas has already accepted the miner's offer. The money has likely already changed hands. You are being rented out, another of the saloon's assets being leveraged for profit. Mary's presentation of it as a special assignment is just another layer of euphemistic varnish on a grim transaction. This practice existed in a legal and moral grey area. It wasn't formal prostitution, but it wasn't marriage either. It was a private arrangement, unrecorded and unregulated. Historians still debate how common this practice was, because of its clandestine nature. There is little official documentation. The evidence comes from court cases involving disputes over payment, from cryptic entries in diaries, and from the folklore of old mining towns. The consensus is that while not an everyday occurrence, it was a known and accepted, if untalked about, part of the frontier economy of companionship. A particularly odd and specific version of this was the Austrian bride system in some mining communities in the Rockies. A group of miners would pool their money to bring a woman over from Europe, who would then live with each of them in rotation. It was a formalized, communal version of the temporary wife arrangement, a bizarre solution to the gender imbalance of the region. The next morning, the miner arrives to collect you. His name is Elias. He's cleaned up, his beard is trimmed, and he's wearing a new shirt. He has a wagon with 2 mules waiting outside. He barely looks at you as you climb aboard with a small bundle of your things. The transaction feels cold and impersonal. You are cargo. The journey to his claim is a silent one. You leave the last ramshackle buildings of the town behind, and the vast, empty landscape opens up around you. The scale of it is intimidating. The silence, which you have craved for so long, is now unnerving. It's a heavy, watchful silence, broken only by the creak of the wagon wheels and the plodding of the mules. You feel incredibly small and vulnerable. Elias's cabin is a tiny, rough-hewn structure clinging to the side of a hill, overlooking the gaping wound of his mine. Inside, it's dark and functional: a bed, a table, a stove. It's cleaner than you expected. He has made an effort. He shows you where to store your things and explains the daily routine. He will work the mine from sunup to sundown. You are to have his meals ready. The instructions are simple, direct, and devoid of any warmth. The first few days are a tense, unspoken negotiation of boundaries. You cook, you clean, you mend his clothes. You perform the role of a wife, and he performs the role of a husband. But it's a hollow performance. There's a constant, humming tension in the small cabin. You are always aware of his presence, of his physical power, of your complete and utter isolation. At night, you lie in the narrow bed, rigid with fear, listening to the sound of his breathing, praying for sleep to come and for the week to pass quickly. You are no longer a saloon girl in a red dress. You are playing a different part now, in a different play, but the fundamental reality is the same. You are living a life that is not your own. Your fate tied to the whims and desires of a man you do not know. This temporary escape from the gilded cage has only led you to a smaller, more isolated, and potentially more dangerous cage. And as you stare out the cabin's single window at the vast, lonely expanse of the wilderness, you wonder if you will survive the week, and if the price of chipping away at your debt will be higher than you could ever have imagined. The days with Elias in his remote cabin stretch into an unnerving eternity. You exist in a state of suspended animation, every action dictated by the grim, silent contract you've entered into. You cook, you clean, you watch him descend into the dark mouth of his mine each morning under merge, covered in dust. Each evening, The silence between you is a heavy blanket, smothered only by the routine sounds of domestic life, the chop of an axe, the sizzle of bacon in a pan, the sigh of the wind through the pines. Then, one evening, something shifts. He comes back from the mine later than usual, his face etched with a deeper exhaustion than you've seen before. He sits at the small table and doesn't eat the meal you've prepared. He just stares at his hands, which are rind calloused, the fingernails permanently rimmed with dirt. The veins playing out. He says, his voice quiet and rough. Found quartzite today. A bad sign. You don't know what quartzite is, but you understand the meaning in his tone. The silver he was chasing, the source of his temporary wealth and the reason for your presence here, is disappearing. His dream is crumbling, turning to worthless rock. He doesn't look at you with anger or frustration. He just looks empty. He starts to talk, not to you, but at the space in front of him. He talks about his home back in Ohio, the farm he left behind, a family he hasn't seen in a decade. He talks about the years he has spent chasing the gleam of ore in the rock, the lonely nights, the back-breaking labor, the countless failed claims before this one small success. His stories are not boasts or complaints, they are a quiet, mournful confession. In this moment, he ceases to be your captor, the intimidating figure of your fears. You see him for what he is, a man as trapped as you are. He is trapped by his own desperate gamble, by the punishing landscape, and by a loneliness so profound it has hollowed him out from the inside. He is not a monster. He is just another soul broken on the wheel of the West. You find yourself doing something you haven't done in months. You listen. You don't perform. You don't calculate. You simply listen to the sound of another human being's pain. You ask a quiet question about his family. He answers. The conversation is so hesitant, to people fumbling in the dark for a connection. This encounter is a rare and precious thing, a moment of genuine, untranscational human kindness. In the world of the saloon, every interaction is a performance. Every smile has a price. Every word is part of a script. The men you meet are playing a role. To the boisterous cowboy, the high-rolling gambler, they are buying an illusion of affection and importance. But here, in this tiny cabin, with the dream of wealth turning to dust, the masks have fallen away. These moments of unexpected gentleness are a recurring, if small, theme in the historical accounts of frontier life. Amidst the violence, exploitation, and brutality, there were flashes of empathy. A lonely homesteader who just wanted to share a meal and talk about his crops. A young cowboy, desperately homesick, who would pay a girl's time just to have her read a letter from his mother aloud to him. These encounters were exceptions to the rule, but they were vital. They were the cracks in the facade that let a little bit of light in, reminding you that the men you served were not a monolithic block of aggressors, but individuals with their own histories and heartbreaks. There's a small but fascinating historical debate about the nature of love and relationships in this context. Did saloon women ever find genuine affection, or even love with their clients? The romantic myth says yes, all the time. The cynical reality says no. It was a business. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the murky middle. It was undoubtedly rare, and often fraught with complications. But to say it never happened would be to deny the stubborn, unpredictable nature of the human heart. These moments of quiet conversation with men like Elias were perhaps not love, but they were a form of intimacy that was, in its own way, just as profound. You and Elias talk late into the night. He tells you about the stars, the different kinds of rock, the way the seasons change in the high country. You tell him a little about your own life before this, not the whole truth, but small, safe pieces of it. For the first time in a long time, you feel like a person, not a product. He sits on the floor that night, rolling himself in a spare blanket, giving you the bed. It's a gesture of respect, a quiet acknowledgement that the terms of your arrangement have subtly, irrevocably changed. You are no longer just a temporary wife. You are the sole witness to his failure, The only person in the world who knows his dream has died. The next morning, the silence has returned. But it's a different kind of silence. It's not heavy and menacing, it's comfortable, companionable. The air in the cabin feels lighter. The weekends. Elias's small fortune is gone, spent on you and on supplies for a mind that will yield nothing more. He drives you back to town in the same rattling wagon. As he drops you off in front of the gilded cage, he presses a small, heavy object into your hand. It's not a coin. It's a raucous, smooth, grey piece of quartzite, the very thing that signaled the end of his dream. A souvenir, he says, and for the first time, he gives you a small, sad smile. Then he turns the wagon around and heads back out of town, disappearing into the dust. He is moving on to the next gamble, the next hope. You walk back into the saloon, the quartzite coolant heavy in your pocket, the noise, the smoke, the smell, it all crashes over you, more jarring and artificial than ever. You have just returned from a different world, a world of quiet desperation and unexpected kindness. The experience hasn't freed you from your debt to Silas, not really, but it has given you something else. A flicker of warmth in the cold, transcational universe you inhabit. A reminder that even in the deepest, darkest corners of this life, a moment of grace is possible. And sometimes, that's enough to keep you going. You return to the gilded cage with the weight of the quartzite in your pocket and a renewed, sharper sense of your own imprisonment. The brief respite in Elias's cabin, for all its fear, had a clean, almost desperation to it. The saloon, by contrast, feels suffocating nigh dishonest. A theater of manufactured fun. The money Elias paid Silas has been duly noted in the ledger, a significant chunk of your debt erased. But looking at the remaining balance, you realize it's still a mountain. The brief taste of progress only makes the long climb ahead seem more impossible. It is then that a new, more potent dream begins to take root in your mind. It's not a vague hope for a better life anymore, it's a concrete, quantifiable goal, the price of a one-way train ticket east, back to a world that may be grey and dull, but is at least sane, a world where you are not a product. The ticket becomes your secret obsession, the focal point of all your energy, and so you begin to build your own secret ledger, your own hidden economy, operating in the shadows of Silas's official one. This is the moment you start your cigar box bank. You find an old, discarded cigar box out behind the saloon. It smells of tobacco and dust. It's a humble, pathetic-looking thing, but to you, it is a vault. It is a vessel for your hope. You hide it under a loose floorboard beneath your narrow bed, a place you pray no one will ever discover, and you begin the slow, painstaking process of feeding it. This becomes a game of inches, a secret war of attrition against the house. Every coin you can skim, every small deception you can manage, is a victory. You learn the art of the underpour, giving a customer a slightly smaller shot of whiskey than they paid for, and pocketing the difference from the till when Gus isn't looking. It's a high-risk maneuver. Getting caught would mean a beating from Frank into debt that doubles overnight. You learn to forget to turn in a token at the end of the night. You earn 10. You turn in 9. The brass token itself is worthless outside the saloon, but you can sometimes trade it to another girl for a real coin, at a terrible exchange rate. A 10-cent token for a 5-cent nickel. It's a losing proposition. But it's a nickel that Silas doesn't know about. A nickel for the box. This practice of skimming or holding out was an open secret in the saloon world. Owners knew it happened and factored it into their business model, which is one reason the official wages were so low and the debts so high. They tried to prevent it with threats and a network of spies. Mary, Gus, even other girls looking to curry favor. For a woman to run a successful secret bank required immense cunning, patience, and a nerve of steel. The historical evidence for these secret stashes is, by its nature, scarce. They were meant to be hidden, but occasionally, when old saloons are renovated or demolished, a dusty box full of old coins is found beneath a floorboard. a tangible ghost of a long-forgotten dream. These finds are archaeological treasures, offering a direct, physical link to the secret lives of these women. One of the more peculiar ways a woman might add to her stash was through the sale of privileges. This wasn't about physical intimacy, but about small, monetizable vanities. For instance, a miner might pay $1 for the privilege of having a woman sew a button on his shirt. A small moment of domesticity that reminded him of home. Or a lonely cowboy might pay 50 cents to have a woman write a letter for him. These small, private transactions happened outside the official token economy, the money going directly into a hidden pocket. And later, into the cigar box. Your life becomes a series of complex calculations. You are constantly weighing risk versus reward. Is it worth trying to charm an extra coin out of a friendly customer, or is he the type to mention his generosity to Silas later? Inadvertently exposing your scheme. Who can you trust? Who is watching? Paranoia becomes your constant companion. The cigar box under the floorboards is more than just a collection of money. It is a tangible representation of your future. Some nights, when the noise from downstairs finally dies down and the moon casts a pale light through your grimy window, you pull up the floorboard. You open the box. You don't count the money. Counting it feels like a jinx. You just look at it. A few nickels. A dozen pennies. A tarnished silver dime. It's a pathetic hoard. A pittance. But it's yours. It is the only thing in this entire world that belongs to you. That Silas cannot touch. Historians debate what this escape really meant for the women who managed to achieve it. Was it a return to a respectable life for some? Perhaps. They might have used the money to move to a new town where they were unknown, to open a small business like a boarding house or a dress shop. But for many, the stigma was indelible. The money might have bought them freedom from the saloon, but not from their past. The dream was often just to get away, to be somewhere else, anywhere else. You lie in bed, the floorboard back in place, your hand resting on the spot where your treasure is hidden. The dream of the train ticket feels both impossibly far away and tantalizingly real. It's a dangerous dream. The longer you save, the more you have to lose. Discovery would be catastrophic. It would mean the loss of not just your money, but the hope that has become your only reason for enduring this life. But the risk is worth it. Every coin you drop into that box is an act of defiance. It is a declaration that you are not just a name in a ledger, not just a girl in a red dress. You are a person with a future, and you are building it. One stolen penny at a time. The gilded cage may own your time, your labor, and your debt, but it does not own your hope. But you keep hidden under the floorboards. Your secret cigar box grows heavier, coin by slow, precarious coin. The dream of the train ticket feels less like a fantasy and more like a possibility. But your fate, you are about to learn, is not entirely in your own hands. It is tied, inextricably, to the fortunes of the town itself. And frontier towns are fickle, volatile things. The town that's continued to call it Silver Creek was born for one reason and one reason, only: the discovery of silver in the surrounding hills. It is a boom town, a temporary settlement built on a foundation of geological luck. The saloon, the general store, the blacksmith, the sheriff's office, every part of it exists to service the mines. The silver is the town's beating heart, and one day, that heart begins to fail. It starts as a rumor, a whisper passed between miners over a glass of torrential juice. The same thing Elias told you in his cabin. The veins are playing out. The high-grade ore is gone, replaced by low-grade quartzite and worthless rock. The whispers grow louder, more anxious. The daily output from the mines, the town's vital sign, begins to drop. You see the change immediately in the gilded cage, the freewheeling. Money is no object, atmosphere evaporates. The miners who used to buy rounds for the entire bar now nurse a single beer for an hour. The high-stakes poker games become penny ante affairs. The men are quieter, their faces grim. The boisterous energy is replaced by a tense, anxious gloom. For you and the other girls, This means fewer customers, fewer drinks, and fewer tokens. The already meager trickle of your official income slows to a drip. This is the classic boom and bust cycle of the American West. A town could spring up overnight, a chaotic, vibrant hub of activity, and disappear just as quickly, leaving behind nothing but empty buildings and ghosts. The list of these ghost towns is Lombardy, California Street, Delmo, Colorado, Virginia City, Montana. They were places of intense, concentrated life that burned brightly and then extinguished. Their fates sealed by geology and economics. As the silver dries up, the town begins to hemorrhage its population. The first to leave are the prospectors and independent miners, the ones with no deep ties, who simply pack their mules and move on, chasing the next rumor of a strike over the next ridge. Then the larger mining companies start laying off workers. Families pack their wagons, abandoning small homesteads they had struggled to build. The town is dying, and you are a passenger on a sinking ship. Silas, ever the pragmatist, sees the writing on the wall. He becomes even more ruthless in his efforts to extract every last penny from the remaining customers and from you. The fines for minor infractions increase. The prices for food and board are jacked up. He is trying to squeeze the last drops of blood from a dying stone. The atmosphere in the saloon becomes sour, desperate. The competition between the girls, already fierce, turns vicious. Every customer is a prize to be fought over. The fragile sisterhood shatters completely, replaced by a grim, every woman for herself mentality. Historians who study the economics of these towns often point to the saloon as a surprisingly accurate barometer of a town's health. When the saloons were loud, crowded, and building new extensions, the town was booming. When the saloons grew quiet, when the professors were fired to save money, and when the inventory of liquor wasn't being restocked, the bust was imminent. A strange and little-known side effect of a town's decline was the property lottery. As people left in a hurry, they would simply abandon their homes and possessions. Sometimes, for a bit of grim fun, the remaining townsfolk would hold an informal lottery, with the winner getting the contents of an abandoned cabin. It was a way of redistributing the meager wealth of the dying community. The final, communal shrug in the face of failure. You watch the town empty out with a growing sense of panic. Your secret fund for the train ticket, which once seemed so close to its goal, is now stagnant. Worse, you find yourself having to dip into it occasionally, just to buy a piece of bread or some other small necessity that your official, non-existent earnings can no longer cover. The dream is slipping away. One day, a large wagon, much larger than the usual prospector's cart, pulls up outside the gilded cage. Men begin loading up the saloon's assets, the long wooden bar, the large mirror from behind it, the billiard table. Silas has sold them. He's liquidating. He knows the game is over. He, with his money and his connections, will be fine. He'll move on to the next boom town, set up a new gilded cage, and start the cycle all over again. For you, however, the situation is dire. You are tied to him by your debt, a debt that is now impossible to pay off. What will he do with you and the other girls? Will he take you with him, or will he simply cut his losses and leave you stranded in this dying town with nothing? The fear of abandonment is a new and terrifying prospect. As much as you hate the gilded cage, it is your source of food and shelter. To be left behind would be a death sentence. A ghost town cannot support ghosts. You lie awake at night, clutching the cigar box, which feels lighter than it did a month ago. You listen to the sounds of the dying town. The silence you once craved is now the sound of your own doom. The choice has been taken away from you. You can't even dream of escape anymore. Your only hope is to cling to the wreckage of the ship, to the very man who chained you to it in the first place. The bust cycle of the West was not just an economic phenomenon, it was a human tragedy, repeated thousands of times. It created a class of perpetually transient people, always chasing a fortune that remained just out of reach. For a saloon woman, it meant that any stability you managed to achieve was built on sand. Your life was dictated not by your own actions, but by the blind, uncaring forces of the market and the earth. The silver gave, and the silver has taken away, and you are left behind in the dust. The liquidation of the gilded cage happens with a cold, swift efficiency. The swinging doors are taken off their hinges. The out-of-tune piano is hauled away. The building is stripped down to a hollow, echoing shell. Cyrus, your proprietor and jailer, is leaving, and he has decided to cut his losses. He gathers you and the few remaining girls, Lily, and one or two others in the empty main room. He doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He simply informs you of the new reality. The business is closed. Your debts, he says with a wave of his hand, are forgiven. It's a meaningless gesture. Forgiving a debt that could never be paid costs him nothing. He tells you that you are free to go. He is abandoning you. He turns and walks out, leaving you standing in the cavernous, silent room that was once the center of your universe. You are free, and you are utterly, hopelessly doomed. This moment is the final, brutal culmination of your time in the West. You have survived the customers, the disease, the exploitation. But now you face a new, more insidious enemy, your own diminishing value in a world that prizes youth above all else. You look at yourself in a shard of broken mirror left on the floor. The past few years have not been kind. Your face, which was once fresh and full of naive hope, is now thin and tired. There are fine lines around your eyes from squinting through smoke and from sleepless nights. The relentless diet of cheap food, stale air, and anxiety has taken its toll. You are no longer the fresh new talent that Silas advertised for. In the brutal calculus of the frontier entertainment market, you are getting old. For a saloon woman, old didn't mean 40 or 50. It could mean 25. The career was brutally short. A brief, bright flame that quickly burned out. The constant influx of new, younger, more desperate girls from the East meant that you were easily replaceable. As your youth and novelty faded, so did your earning potential. You were a depreciating asset. You and Lily, your former rival, now find yourselves in the same desperate situation. You sit on the edge of the empty stage, the dust motes dancing in the faint light. The animosity between you has evaporated, replaced by a shared, silent terror. What now, she asks, her voice, for the first time, stripped of its usual bravado. It's a question neither of you can answer. You could try to move on to another boomtown, but how your cigar box, once a symbol of hope, is merely empty. It holds enough for a few meals, perhaps, but not for a stagecoach ticket, let alone a train ticket east. And even if you could get to another town, what would you find? You would be starting over from the bottom, competing with girls 5 years younger than you, girls whose faces don't yet show the mileage of the life. The sphere of aging, of becoming obsolete, was the ultimate psychological burden for these women. It's a theme that historians see woven through the few personal accounts that have survived. There was a frantic, desperate quality to their lives, a race against time to earn enough, to save enough, before their looks faded and their value plummeted. A particularly poignant and little-known aspect of this was the cosmetics of the day. With no modern makeup industry, women had to be creative. Rouge was often made from beet juice or crushed geranium petals, to make their eyes appear brighter and their pupils more dilated, a sign of beauty and arousal. Some women would use drops of belladonna, a toxic plant extract that could, over time, damage their vision. They were literally poisoning themselves in small increments, all in a desperate attempt to hold back the tide of time, to preserve the one asset they had. The options for an aging saloon girl were grim. Some might find a tenuous form of security by becoming a house mother like Mary, but those positions were few and far between. Some might descend to the lowest rungs of the industry, working in the filthiest hurdy-gurdy houses or cribs for a pittance, their health failing, their spirits broken. Some simply vanished from the historical record, their fates unknown. The question of what happened to these retired women is one of the great, sad mysteries that historians of the West grapple with. There were no pensions, no social safety nets. They were cast aside, used up by a system that had no further need for them. Some may have found a precarious existence as laundresses or seamstresses, the very jobs they had fled the East to escape. These were respectable but poorly paid, a life of grinding poverty. You look at Lily. You see the faint tremor in her hands, the slight stoop in her shoulders that wasn't there a year ago. You see your own fear reflected in her eyes. The gilded cage, for all its horrors, was a structure. It was a world with rules, a place where you had a role. Now, there is nothing. You are adrift in a ghost town, with no money, no prospects, and the one currency you possessed your youth spent. You pull the piece of quartzite from your pocket, the rock that Elias gave you. It feels solid and real in a world that has just dissolved around you. It's a souvenir from a dead dream. You wonder what happened to him. You wonder what will happen to you. The sun sets on Silver Creek, casting long shadows through the empty doorway of the saloon. The silence is absolute. It is the silence of the end. You are no longer a saloon girl, because there is no saloon. You are no longer in debt, because there is no one to owe. You have been freed into a vacuum, and as the darkness gathers, you are faced with the terrifying, paralyzing question that plagued thousands of women just like you when the performance is over. Who are you and where in the world are you supposed to go? The ghost town of Silver Creek is a purgatory. Days are spent in a listless haze, wandering the empty streets. The silence broken only by the wind whistling through the vacant buildings. You and Lily, now bound by a shared desperation, survive on the last of your hidden coins and whatever you can scavenge. The hope that fueled your cigar box bank has curdled into a cold, hard knot of despair in your stomach. Then, one afternoon, a flicker of that old, dangerous hope returns. A wagon train, a small one, passes through on its way to a new settlement further west. They are families, homesteaders, looking for a fresh start. They are not looking for saloon girls. But among them is a man, a merchant, who sees an opportunity. He is heading to a newly platted town called Terminus, a place being built at the end of a new railway line. He says it's the next big thing. He needs a cook for the journey, and he's willing to offer passage in exchange for work. It's a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it's the only one you have. Lily is hesitant. She has heard stories of these brand new towns, how rough they are, how they are even more lawless than a place like Silver Creek. But you manage to convince her, staying here is a slow death. Moving on is at least a chance. Together, you approach the merchant and, after a long negotiation, he agrees to take you both. You will cook and clean for the entire party. It will be grueling work. But at the end of the road is a town called Terminus. A new beginning. The journey is hard. You are back to being a domestic servant, the very life you once fled. You cook over open fires. You wash clothes in cold streams. You sleep on the hard ground, but there is a grim sense of purpose to it. You are moving. You are not stagnant. With every mile you put between yourself and the ghost of Silver Creek, a tiny part of your spirit begins to heal. You and Lily work as a team. The old rivalry is a distant memory, burned away by your shared ordeal. You learn to rely on each other, to anticipate each other's needs, to find small moments of humor in the daily hardship. A real, genuine friendship, the kind you once thought impossible, begins to form. You start to dream, cautiously, of a different future, maybe in Terminus. You won't be saloon girls. Maybe you can open a small laundry service. Or a bakery. A respectable life. A life that is your own. After weeks of travel, you arrive at Terminus, and your heart sinks. It is not a town. It is a raw, chaotic construction camp. A sea of mud, tents, and half-finished wooden structures. The air rings with the sound of hammers and saws, and the shouts of the railway crews. And in the center of it all, already doing a brisk business from a massive tent, is a saloon. It is louder, cruder, and more menacing than the gilded cage ever was. Your employer, the merchant, pays you for your work a few dollars, barely enough to survive on for a week. Your dream of opening a bakery evaporates in the muddy reality of Terminus. There is only one industry here servicing the thousands of railway workers. And there is only one way for a woman with no capital and a certain kind of history to make a living. You and Lily stand before the saloon tent, the raucous noise spilling out into the night. It feels like a nightmare you can't wake up from. You have traveled hundreds of miles, only to end up right back where you started. It's Lily who breaks. I can't, she whispers, her face pale in the lantern light. I can't do it again. And in that moment, a desperate, reckless plan is born. You will not go into that saloon. You will run. You have a few dollars. It's not enough for a train ticket, but it might be enough to get you to the next town. And the next, you will become drifters, ghosts of a different kind, always moving, always one step ahead of the life that is trying to reclaim you. You wait until the dead of night, when the camp is at its quietest. You slip out of your tent, your meager belongings bundled in a shawl. You move like shadows through the muddy tracks, heading for the road that leads out of town. Your heart is a frantic drum. This is it, a real escape. But you have forgotten the cardinal rule of these lawless places. Everything is watched. Nothing goes unnoticed. As you reach the edge of the camp, a figure steps out from the shadows. It's the saloon owner, a man with cold, dead eyes, flanked by two of his bouncers. He had seen you arrive. He had been watching you. He had already factored you into his business plan. Leaving so soon, ladies, he says, his voice a low sneer. I don't think so. We have positions for you. This is a moment that plays out in many historical narratives of the West, though it's often sensationalized. The reality of a failed escape was often quiet, brutal, and final. There was no chase on horseback. There was just this, a confrontation in the dark, where all the power is on one side. Historians debate how organized this recruitment was. Was it a coordinated network, a form of trafficking, or just opportunistic predators operating independently? The answer is likely both. In an environment with no law, the only rule is the rule of the strong. There is no struggle, there is no fight. You are outnumbered and overpowered. The bouncers grab you and Lily. Their grips like iron. They don't drag you, they simply walk you, firmly and implacably, towards the roaring tent, towards the noise and the smoke and the life you had so desperately tried to leave behind. They push you through the flap of the tent, and you are back, the smell of stale beer and sweat, the sound of the out-of-tune piano, the sea of men's faces turning to look at the new girls. It's the gilded cage all over again, but worse, stripped of any pretense of civility. This is the ultimate failure. It's not just that your plan didn't work. It's that the hope that fueled it has been utterly extinguished. Before, you were trapped by debt. Now, you are trapped by force. The cage has no bars of arithmetic anymore. It has bars of muscle and fear. You look at Lily, and you see the light in her eyes has gone out completely. Your one true friend, your partner in this desperate gamble, is broken. And as the saloon owner shoves a drink token into your hand and points you towards a table of leering men, you feel your own spirit break right along with hers. The escape has failed, and in doing so, it has destroyed the one thing you had left the will to try again. You are back in the cage. This new saloon in Terminus is a cruder, more brutal version of the gilded cage, but the mechanics are identical. The owner is a man named Flannery, more openly vicious than Silas ever was. The patrons are railway workers, their loneliness sharpened by the grueling, monotonous labor of laying track. The work is harder, the nights are longer, and the ever-present threat of violence is a constant, suffocating pressure. Lily is a ghost of her from herself. The fire that once animated her, the sharp, competitive spark, has been completely extinguished. She moves through her shifts like an automaton, her eyes vacant, her smile a grotesque, painted on grimace. She drinks the cold tea. She laughs at the jokes. She collects the tokens, but she is no longer there. The failed escape broke something deep inside her. You try to talk to her, to rekindle the friendship forged on the road, but it's like talking to a brick wall. She is lost in her own private hell. Then, one day, the impossible happens. It is an event so rare, so statistically improbable, that it has become the stuff of legend and myth. It is the fairy tale ending that every saloon girl secretly, foolishly, dreams of. A man starts frequenting the saloon. He is not a railway worker. He is an engineer. A surveyor for the railroad company. His name is Arthur. He is quiet, educated, and carries himself with a gentle, melancholy air. He is different from the other men. He doesn't get drunk. He doesn't gamble. He comes to the saloon, it seems, simply to escape the crushing boredom and isolation of the construction camp. And he singles out Lily. He requests her company every night. He doesn't make clumsy advances or demand boisterous entertainment. He just talks to her. He asks her about her life, not in a prurient, prying way, but with what seems like genuine interest. At first, Lily is unresponsive, answering in monosyllables, her spirit still in lockdown. But Arthur is patient. He keeps coming back. He brings her small gifts, a book of poetry, a ribbon for her hair. Slowly, miraculously, you see a change in her. A flicker of light returns to her eyes. The conversations with Arthur become a lifeline. A small island of peace in the chaotic sea of the saloon. He is treating her not as a commodity, but as a human being. He is seeing the person underneath the cheap undress and the painted-on smile. The idea of a saloon girl marrying up is the ultimate Hollywood trope. In films, it's a common occurrence, the standard reward for the prostitute with a heart of gold. In historical reality, it was almost unheard of. The social stigma attached to the profession was a nearly insurmountable barrier. A man who married a saloon girl would face ostracism from his own social class, his reputation irrevocably tarnished. For a man like Arthur, with a professional career, it would be social and professional suicide. And yet, it happened. The historical record contains a few precious examples. The most famous is the story of Silver Heels, a dance-hall girl in a Colorado mining camp who nursed the town through a smallpox epidemic. A wealthy miner, moved by her courage, fell in love with her and married her. Another is Eleanor Dumont, the famous gambler known as Madame Moustache, who had a brief, tragic marriage to a much younger man. These stories are remembered precisely because they are so exceptional. They are the statistical outliers, the one in a million shots. The question that historians debate is, what was the reality of these rare marriages? Was it a true fairy tale ending, or was it simply exchanging one kind of cage for another? The evidence is mixed and often tragic. Many of these relationships did not last. The weight of social disapproval, the woman's own past trauma, and the vast cultural gap between them often proved too much to overcome. The happily ever after was often just a new and more complicated chapter of struggle. One day, Arthur asks to speak to Flannery, the owner. They disappear into the back office. The other girls watch. Their faces a mixture of envy, disbelief, and cynical scorn. They are sure this will end badly. But a few minutes later, Arthur and Flannery emerge. Arthur looks grim but determined. He walks over to Lily, who has been watching with a terrified, hopeful expression. "Pack your things," Arthur says to her, his voice soft but firm. "You're leaving." He has bought her. He has paid off whatever imaginary debt Flannery had assigned to her. And then some. He has purchased her freedom. It is not a romantic proposal in the traditional sense. It is a transaction. A rescue conducted in the only language men like Flannery understand. Nellie knocks at you, her eyes wide with a combination of terror and elation. You help her pack her few belongings, your hands trembling as much as hers. This is it. The myth is coming true for her. She is escaping. As she is about to leave, She turns to you. There are a million things to say, but no words to say them. She just hugs you. A fierce, desperate embrace. "I'm sorry," she whispers. It's an apology for leaving you behind. An acknowledgement of the brutal, arbitrary nature of fate. Why her, why not you? There is no answer. It's just the random, cruel luck of the draw. You watch from the doorway of the tent as Arthur helps her onto his horse. He wraps a clean, respectable-looking cloak around her shoulders, covering the gaudy saloon dress. They ride off, not into the sunset, but into the grey, uncertain dawn of a new life. They do not look back. You are left standing there, alone. You feel a surge of genuine happiness for your friend, a feeling so pure it surprises you. But it is quickly followed by a wave of the most profound and desolate loneliness you have ever experienced. You have witnessed a miracle, and the miracle has passed you by. The one person in the world you could call a friend is gone. The cage feels smaller, darker, and more inescapable than ever before. The one in a million charts has been used up, and it wasn't yours. Lilith's miraculous departure leaves a void in the saloon, and in you. The days that follow are a blur of monotonous misery. Without her, the grim routine of life in Terminus is almost unbearable. The railway line is completed. The construction crews, your primary clientele, moves on. The town, which never truly boomed, begins its slow, inevitable slide toward bust. Flannery, the owner, sells the saloon to a less ambitious proprietor, and you are passed along with the deed, a piece of furniture in a failing business. Years pass. The sharp edges of your youth have worn away completely, replaced by a permanent, deep-seated weariness. You are no longer a girl. You are one of the old hands, a permanent fixture in a forgotten corner of the West. You've seen dozens of new girls arrive, full of the same naive hope you once had, and you've watched them burn out, break down, or disappear. You have become the ghost in the machine. Your health, which you guarded so jealously, begins to fail. A persistent cough becomes a constant companion. Your joints ache from decades of standing, of feigning dances with clumsy, drunken men. You move from the main floor to a back room, serving the few remaining regulars who are as old and worn out as you are. Your earning potential dwindles to almost nothing. You are entirely dependent on the grudging charity of the saloon owner for your meager food and your small Dan prune. One day, you are too sick to get out of bed. This time, there is no recovery. There is no pretense. You have outlived your usefulness. The system, which you have served for your entire adult life, has finally finished with you. You are discarded. Your final journey is a short one. You are moved, not to a hospital, but to a small, charity-run pest house on the outskirts of the dying town. It's a place for the indigent and the terminally ill, a place people go to die. Your last days are spent in a narrow cot, staring at a water-stained ceiling, the sounds of the saloon replaced by the quiet coughing of other forgotten souls. You have no possessions left, save for the smooth, grey piece of quartzite Anais gave you a lifetime ago. You hold it in your hand, its coolness a final, faint connection to a moment of kindness in a life defined by cruelty. And then, it's over. Your passing goes unnoticed by the town. There is no funeral, no obituary. There is only the quiet, efficient disposal of a problem. Your body is placed in a simple pine box, and you are taken to the town cemetery. But you are not buried in the main part of the cemetery, among the respectable families with their carved headstones on iron fences. You are taken to a lonely, neglected patch of ground at the far edge, a place often referred to as Boot Hill. The name Boot Hill is iconic, synonymous with the Wild West. Most people associate it with gunfighters and outlaws, men who died with their boots on. And while some of these cemeteries did hold famous gunslingers, their primary purpose was far more prosaic and sad. They were the potter's fields of the frontier, the final resting place for the town's unnamed, unwanted, and indigent population, gamblers, drifters, unknown travelers, and, most numerous of all, the women from the saloons. Here, there are no marble angels or poetic epitaphs. There are only rows of simple wooden crosses, or, more often, just mounds of earth marked by a pile of rocks. The markers, if they ever had names, have long since been erased by the wind and the rain. It is a landscape of anonymity. This is the final, stark evidence of the social chasm that defined your life. Even in death, you are segregated, kept apart from the respectable society you served but could never join. Your contribution to the town's economy and social fabric is forgotten, your existence erased. The historical study of these frontier cemeteries is a specialized field known as graveyard archaeology. By excavating these sites, historians and archaeologists can learn a great deal about the people who were forgotten by the written record. They can determine age, sex, and sometimes even cause of death from skeletal remains. They can analyze coffin hardware and clothing remnants to understand the economic status of the interred. These studies provide a powerful, if grim, corrective to the romantic myths. They show a population that died young, often from violence or disease, and they show a disproportionate number of women buried in these lonely, unmarked graves. Your pine box is lowered into the ground. A few less of dry, rocky soil are thrown on top. There is no priest, no eulogy. The only sound is the wind. The men who bury you are just town workers, performing a job. They plant a simple, unpainted wooden cross at the head of the grave. It bears no name. Within a few years, it will rot and fall, and the mound of your grave will settle, eventually becoming indistinguishable from the surrounding earth. You have become completely anonymous, your story swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. You are one of the countless, nameless women whose lives fueled the great engine of the West, only to be forgotten when you were no longer of use. Your laughter, your tears, your secret hopes, your one precious friendship with Lily, your brief moment of connection with a lonely miner, all of it is gone, vanished as if it never was. All that remains is an unmarked grave on a lonely hill. We stand now, metaphorically, on that lonely, windswept boot hill, looking out over the rows of forgotten graves. Your story, the one we followed from the false promises of the East to this anonymous patch of earth, is over. And it's here that we must ask the final, most important question if this was the grim, brutal reality. Why don't we remember it this way? Why, instead, do we have the myth? The myth of the glamorous, saucy, independent saloon girl with a heart of gold is one of the most enduring and powerful creations of American popular culture. She is a stock character, as recognizable as the stoic cowboy or the black-hatted villain. She is witty, beautiful, and world-weary, but underneath her tough exterior beats a noble heart. She can handle herself in a brawl, outsmart the villain, and in the final reel, she often redeems the hero and rides off with him into the sunset. Her name is Miss Kitty, or Clementine, or Dallas. She is a fantasy. This fantasy wasn't created by accident. It was a deliberate, gradual process of historical sanitization, driven by the needs of storytelling and a collective desire to romanticize a complicated and often ugly period of history. The transformation began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with the rise of dime novels and, later, Wild West shows like Buffalo Bills. These were forms of entertainment that simplified the past into a series of clear-cut moral dramas. They needed heroes and villains, and they needed romantic interests. The complex, tragic figure of the exploited saloon worker was a poor fit for these simple narratives, so she was rewritten. Her desperation was recast as independence. Her forced compliance was turned into plucky wit. Her transcational relationships were transformed into epic romances. Hollywood, in its golden age, took this sanitized version and set it in stone. In countless westerns, the saloon is the central hub of the town, but it's a curiously clean and cheerful place. The whiskey flows, but no one gets truly, dangerously sick from it. The fights are stylized ballets of flying fists and breaking chairs, with no real-world consequences. And the saloon girl is its charming, ever-present hostess. She is essential to the plot. But the grim realities of her profession, the debt, the disease, the violence, the constant threat of sexual exploitation are almost completely erased. She is a safe, romanticized version of a dangerous woman. The reasons for this are complex. Part of it was simple commercial appeal. Audiences wanted entertainment, not a grim lecture on labor exploitation. Part of it was the Hays Code, the set of moral guidelines that governed Hollywood filmmaking for decades. The code strictly limited depictions of immorality. A realistic portrayal of a saloon girl's life would have been impossible to get on screen. So filmmakers found a workaround. They kept the character but stripped her of the grim realities of her profession, making her good at heart, and thus acceptable to the censors. This historical whitewash serves a deeper psychological purpose. The westward expansion is a core part of America's founding mythology. It's a story about courage, individualism, and manifest destiny. The true story of the saloon girl complicates that narrative. It introduces themes of class exploitation, gender inequality, and the brutal human cost of empire. It's an uncomfortable story. It's easier to remember the myth of the heroic cowboy than the reality of the desperate woman who served him his watered-down drink. Historians today are actively working to dismantle this myth through deep archival research, social history, and even archaeology. They are piecing together a more accurate, more nuanced, and far more tragic picture. They are giving a voice to the voiceless, exhuming the stories buried in unmarked graves like yours. They are asking us to look past the swinging doors of the fantasy saloon and into the real, dark, and desperate world that lay behind them. The question of why we chose to remember the fantasy instead of the reality is one that scholars will continue to debate. Was it a conscious effort to hide the sins of the past, or a more subconscious, collective act of forgetting? Was it driven by cynical commercialism or by a genuine desire for heroic national myths? The answer is likely all of the above. The myth of the saloon girl is a powerful cultural artifact because it tells us more about the people who created it than it does about the women it claims to represent. So we leave you here, in this quiet, lonely place. Your individual story is lost, but your collective truth is slowly being rediscovered. The myth of the girl in the bright satin dress who always got her man is fading, replaced by the ghost of the woman in the tattered costume who was trapped in a cage, who dreamed of a train ticket, and whose final resting place was a nameless grave on a hill. We choose to remember her, not because her story is happy, but because it is true, and because forgetting her is the final, greatest injustice of all. The air on the hill grows cooler now. The last light of the day has faded from the sky, and the first stars begin to appear, cold and distant in the vast, dark expanse. The wind whispers through the dry grass, a soft, mournful sound, like a sigh that has been held for a century. The world of the gilded cage, of terminus, of the noise and the fear, all of it feels very, very far away now. It's like a story you heard a long time ago, about someone else. You can feel a deep stillness settling over you, a quiet that is more profound than any silence you ever knew in life. The anxieties that pulled you taut for so long, the debt, the loneliness, the fear have finally unspooled. The weight is gone. There is no more performing, no more pretending. There is only this deep, peaceful, and endless rest. The frantic energy of the world has receded, leaving behind a vast commotion of quiet. You are drifting now, on a gentle, unseen current, away from the lonely hill, away from the memories. The edges of your story are softening, blurring into the peaceful landscape of a dream. You are a part of the starlight now, a part of the whispering wind. You are a part of the quiet earth. There is no more pain, no more struggle. There is only peace. Let the current carry you. Let the darkness be a soft blanket. Let the silence be a lullaby. It's time to sleep. The end of the article. Good night.